Okay, we'll call our meeting to order, the November 13th, 2025 work session of the Williams County School Board. We will first look at our consent agenda, and you've got those items listed in front of you on the agenda. Are there any of those items that anyone wishes to discuss or remove? All right, hearing none, we will vote on those Monday night as written. And that takes us to our superintendent's report. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, board members. On your agenda, we have one item, the textbook adoption update presentation, those monthly updates we give you. I do want to let you know I've added a couple of other relatively short presentations. Had a couple of you ask about an update on the screen time committee work, so we're going to give you a bit of an update on that. If I'm not mistaken, Dr. Allen, I think 4 board members are actually there. So we thought there was some value in giving the rest of the board some information on the work of the Screen Time Committee. Also, Rachel is going to give you a start kind of first look at where we are with the budget. In the coming months, we don't have December scheduled for a meeting. In the coming months, we're going to be doing some work. So I wanted you all to get kind of a snapshot of what the budget looks, at least at this very, very preliminary spot. So before I ask Jen Sauer to start to talk about the textbook committee, I do want to mention a couple of just-in-time issues. Number one, I know we've had some discussions about this, but I want to say this out loud one more time. Today is November 13th. 2 days ago was Veterans Day, and you all have voted over these last few years, and we have intentionally made sure that we've had school on Veterans Day. And I know, Dr. Driggers, you and I had a conversation. I think you said years ago you had expressed an opposition to school being in session on Veterans Day.
A law in California forcing the universities to honor Veterans Day on Veterans Day.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed until I went to my first Veterans Day parade, so it's a good compromise.
Yeah.
The kids get out, they study history, they study their veterans. It's a great deal. I'm happy.
Yeah. So we've had some really good Veterans Day programs. You can't make it to all of them because we have so many. This year I was able to make it to a high school, middle, and elementary Veterans Day program. I know, Mr. Cash, you were there. We've had a few county commissioners come, and I know some of you participated in the parade as well. I mentioned to the county commission at their Monday night meeting that through the school year, every once in a while you hit a spot that tells you who we are. And Veterans Day is one of those spots in the calendar. So I want to thank you all. We have 3 veterans here. So I know this is odd, but I'm going to ask you all, we're 2 days past Veterans Day. Those of you who are veterans, could you please stand? 4. Thank you. Adam, thank you. So thank you all for your service. I know it's 2 days late, but it's just overwhelming sometimes thinking about the sacrifices we've had from those who continue to serve. I did want to mention one suggestion I had to our elementary students who I spoke to briefly as they were preparing their Veterans Day program. I suggested that if they know a veteran, to ask them to tell a story. My experience is veterans tend to be humble. And probably aren't going to volunteer something unless you ask them. So for what that's worth, and I think that's worth a lot. Also, I want to mention Thanksgiving is coming up, and the Girl Scouts, the local Girl Scouts had some conversations with us a few weeks ago, and they were looking to do something to help families at Thanksgiving time. And we got involved in putting together a list of food items where we could give folks a Thanksgiving dinner. And if I'm not mistaken, Lydia, we have had over, 600 boxes now?
612 as of just a few moments ago when I had 9 loaded into my car.
So we had so far 612 boxes. We structured it where we're doing bankers boxes. Melissa, I know you've been active in some neighborhoods. Grassland community has been active, and I'm going to miss some because there are so many folks
Girl
involved.
Scouts, Cub Scouts, the Arrington area, the Spring Hill area. Oh, I'm sorry. We had Girl Scouts and Cub Scouts. Today we got a rented U-Haul from the Grassland Middle area, Grassland Elementary area, 257 boxes. And it's just been amazing. One Genoway, the Well, Graceworks.
Graceworks.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's been amazing.
And so I was actually asked a few weeks ago by a reporter who was just, I think, just creating an interview for multiple stories. She asked about some of the issues related to federal funding, and I told her, we generally don't get federal funding to speak of regardless, and so we really do rely on our community. And Graceworks, One Genoway, the Well, the Girl Scouts, it's been pretty impressive. I will mention to you, this is the time of year where people are thinking about that with Thanksgiving dinners, but Graceworks, the Well, and One Genoway have a sustainable process where families in our community who need help throughout the year have that support. The director of Graceworks spoke briefly to the county commission on Monday night, and she said that their numbers show that there are about 3,300 individuals in Williamson County who need regular food support. And so for what it's worth, and again, I think it's worth a lot, we've got a great community who's willing to step up when they see some opportunities. Felt like I had to mention those two things, Mr. Chair. I think it's the season for it. So with that, I am going to ask Dr. Allen, your team, if you would, give the board an update on where we are with this year's textbook selection process.
Well, thanks, y'all. I thought this was going to be a really, really quick presentation, and then I got some new information from the state just yesterday. So this is hot off the presses for you. The first slide is not hot off the presses. A couple of weeks ago, we had our very first textbook committee meeting. If you remember, that was intentionally placed before we would have any materials available, because the intention was really to kind of set the stage with our committee, get them acclimated to the process, and really get them starting to think about what can a new adapted instructional resource provide for those teachers and those students in those different courses. So our intentions in that meeting that I think we met were establish the importance of instructional materials both for teaching and for learning, develop a picture of an ideal classroom in each content area. So one of the things we invited both the teachers in the room as well as the parents and community members who were present were to really think about, if you're picturing that ideal classroom in this particular content area, what are the students doing? What is the teacher doing? And then what are the resources that we need to make that a reality? So that was kind of our setting the stage work. And then they use that to then create those criteria checklists that they'll be using to evaluate instructional materials when they're available. Okay, this is yesterday. If you remember, I've been closely monitoring the state TDOE website to look for when are they going to post the agenda for that meeting that's happening next Friday. So yesterday, they posted the agenda. I'm going to say several times, remember that nothing is finalized until that November 21st vote occurs. So this is just preliminary information based on that agenda that they've posted. But you have access to this presentation if you want to be able to go straight to the links. So the first link will take you to, here's the agenda for that meeting on November 21st. And then the second link is the direct link to the list of publishers and titles that are being recommended by the State Textbook Commission. Again, until that state board votes, that's not an official list, but it is what they have out right now. I pulled from that list. So I'm going to tell you, when you look at the list, it's long. There are a lot of courses on that list that we don't teach in Williamson County. So rather than having you go through that list and try and tease out which one are the ones that we offer in our schools, this is kind of that curated list for you. So I kind of group them by the content area. So we have advanced manufacturing and engineering. Here are the courses, and then those are the publishers and titles. Again, remember, it's not final until that vote on November 21st. The next slide is the IT courses, so the information technology courses. Again, here are the courses, and then that's the publisher and the title. Reminder, it's not final until November 21st. And then for Lifetime Wellness, which is that high school PE and health course, those are the publishers, and then those are the titles. There's 2 reminders in this slide because, as a reminder, the state didn't vet middle school health curriculum. So what we've done is we've reached out to those same publishers that you see on that list to ask for, can you send us samples of your middle school materials? They have them, but they were not submitted to our state for their vetting process. We're, like I said, yesterday is when we got this information, and until that state vote happens next Friday, it's not final, which means it isn't actionable yet for us, but I did want to kind of give you some information you can pull together if you're interested and starting to look at any materials. So the next step on our side is going to be, once that vote happens on November 21st, we'll reach out to all of those publishers to get review materials, both digital access and physical. In the meantime, if you remember on that state website, they have a list too. Here are the digital samples that those publishers submitted several months ago. So if you're interested in taking a look at them, what information we have now is, here's what we predict is going to actually be put in front of us to be able to have to choose from for adoption. Do you have questions about any of that?
Which, if any, of those publishers is the one that we're currently using?
So let me go back to here. Dave, I'm going to ask, do you know for any of those engineering courses?
I knew you were going to ask me.
You can let us know.
That's
later.
okay, yeah.
It's not critical to know right now. I just was curious more than anything.
Okay,
We believe it's Cengage, but we will get you that information.
yeah, we'll confirm that.
Yeah, as far as the coding classes go, we use primarily CodeHS.
Yeah, that one I was pretty confident that we use CodeHS in most of our IT courses. And then when we go to Lifetime Wellness, these are all brand new. Those are not books that we use in Lifetime Wellness right now. Okay, so kind of what are our next steps going to be? So we do predict that on November 21st, the state board will meet, and they will either choose to vote for that list, or potentially something else could happen. So we'll be monitoring that really closely. Once that is official, the Tennessee Textbook Commission will publish that final adoption list. Our next committee meeting is on December 8th. So our intention on that date is that we will have that finalized list from the state. We'll be able to present that to the committee, and then we'll kind of talk in detail with the committee about, so what is the rest of the adoption process going to look like? And then another thing that happens on that date, once we know who the publishers are, is we have the committee swear that oath that's required by TDOE, that they have not and will not be inappropriately influenced by any publisher. This part happens really quick because, if you remember, you as a board won't have a meeting in December. So this is going to happen, and you guys aren't going to be meeting, so I won't be able to come and kind of fill you in on that part of the process. We will have a meeting in January. January is right when we're in the thick of going through the rest of that review. So if you remember, our public reviews are going to begin in January. I have those dates on a slide that's coming up. Our next meeting of the committee is tentatively set for the 16th or the 20th. So now, as soon as we know for sure who those publishers are, I'll be reaching out to them to get that date finalized so that we can let you know and we can let our committee know. That's when the publishers will come and meet with the committee to kind of talk through, here's what our resource provides. And it's kind of a recap of all of those things for you as a reminder of all the dates. And then that final date is February 24th. That's the date when the committee will actually come together to cast their recommendation. Those public reviews are here. Those will be held here at the PD Center. We'll have physical materials available, and then we'll also have access to digital materials that we'll be able to share at the public review. And we'll also, just like what we did last year, post that digital access that's available for public review to our website. And in both places, both here at the PD Center for public reviews and then on the website, right where we put the link to any digital access we have, we'll have a link to the electronic form where we invite the public to submit any public comments that they have. If they come in person to the PD Center, we also have that form available on paper if they prefer that format. We will soon be sharing all of those public review dates and times. I've been in some contact with Carol Birdsog's team. I think what we settled on is she's going to do an initial publishing in December and then again a reminder in January that goes out through InFocus. And then we'll have all those other sources as well to make sure that people know that this is when all those materials are available for public review. Okay. That's all I have. Do you guys have other questions for me?
Board members, I did want to let you know, because we have some links there, we'll send you, we'll attach the PowerPoint, and you'll be able to click on some of those links if you want to look at it. All right, thank you. Next, I do want to ask Dr. Allen, I think Jenny Lopez, to give the board an update on the progress of the Screen Time Committee. I know they didn't make any decisions or any recommendations. They were just learning at their meeting 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken. So, Ms. Lopez, if you would, give the board an update. And for 4 of the 12 of you, you already know this, but I felt like everybody needed to hear this.
Thank you, Superintendent Golden. Good evening, board members. I want to start by thanking board members Tanya Hipma and Melissa Wyatt for their continued participation and contribution to the Screen Time and Technology Use Committee. They continue to partner with us and meet to plan our committee meetings and provide really valuable feedback that we use monthly. I also want to thank Mr. Galbraith and Dr. Driggers for attending the meeting a couple of days ago. I'm sure that when I'm done with my update, they will have, these 4 board members may have feedback and even their own impressions and information that they want to share with you as well. With wireless communication, that's a topic that we took on for the first 2 months of our committee. With that being completed, our next topic at our Screen Time and Technology Use Committee is technology integration, followed by screen time. So what the goal is right now for us, for our committee, is to create technology use guidance, a document that will serve as an official district-wide protocol that establishes standards for appropriate integration of technology and instructional practices, including screen time. That is feedback that we got from the committee. So our original timeline would have had us completing that guidance this month, but we clearly heard feedback from the committee members saying that they wanted to look at screen time and app usage as part of technology integration, how we use technology, and include that, address that in the guidance that they create. So this resulted in combining 2 topics that were to be tackled separately as one. So right now last month, we really focused on technology integration and safety, internet safety, And this month, we really looked at usage, at data, looking at minutes used for our district. So I'll give you a little recap of October. It's really important to understand what we did in October because it really explains the minutes a lot better once you understand what our work in October was. So the synopsis of that work that we accomplished over in October, we provided background information to our committee members on the current state of technology integration and internet safety. We really started with safety because internet safety is first. So that's the most important piece that we look at. So Phil Fulmer, our network manager in the IT department, provided the committee with lots of information on the work of the IT department to keep our students and staff safe online. He describes security and safety measures that we take to ensure that we are safely using all apps and all internet usage in our district. We provided the committee with the laws and regulations that we follow related to internet safety and the protection of personal identifiable information, which we take very seriously. Andy then described in detail the application vetting process. So besides having a lot of work in place to really ensure our security and safety, we also have an application vetting process. So anytime that a teacher or a school wants to use an app that requires a login, so if the student is getting into an app with a login, that app must go through a vetting process to ensure that the application meets federal and state privacy laws and are instructionally aligned to the work of the grade. So we look at the app for alignment to grade level material, and we also look, of course, at all of the laws that would keep student information safe. The committee was really impressed with the multiple layers of protection that we utilize to offer the most secure system possible to students and staff, and that is feedback that we received from several committee members. Andy Davis, our instructional technology director, provided detailed information on how we train our teachers, how we support our teachers in the use of technology. So besides vetting apps, we also train our teachers on the correct use of technology in the classroom. She started by explaining that we train our teachers to always begin with the focus on the standards. So before we determine how we're going to teach or what materials we're going to use to teach, we start with the standards first. And after looking at the standards, then we begin to plan the instruction. First, we implement high-quality instructional materials, and we consider everything that offers before we look at any other materials. So we look at our high-quality instructional materials to deliver the teaching that optimizes student learning around the standard. When selecting teaching strategies for any particular lesson, technology should not be considered for use unless it enhances student learning in that lesson. So basically, how we train our teachers is, if students' learning is optimized without the need to implement any app or technology, then our recommendation is that they do not use technology to do that. But if we find that the learning is optimized or enhanced by using technology, then we talk about how we're going to use that technology. Teachers are also trained to consider the difference between active and passive use of technology so that utilizing technology is done in ways that engage students and promote active participation in learning. We engaged in an activity, actually, we had our committee members up and doing some work, and what we did was we gave them a scenario where technology was being used, and they assessed that scenario where technology was part of the lesson to determine whether using that technology really helped to enhance the learning or whether it didn't, whether it was passive or active. So they actually engaged in an assessment tool that we use to guide the appropriate use of technology. In some cases, they found that the tool was not necessary, that technology tool was not necessary. And in other cases, they found that the tool actually enhanced the learning because it required the student to create something or to collaborate in ways that otherwise couldn't be done without technology. We also informed the committee on some of the required components that we teach students, where we teach students which require technology. Some of those, for example, are the Tennessee Computer Science Standards. Those are embedded in core content in some cases, and they're also part of our computer science courses in the middle and high school. We also utilize technology in some cases to administer required assessments. Some of those examples are state testing, so like TCAP. Right now, we assess students on TCAP 6th grade and up through high school. Next, the following school year, so this 26-27 school year, that'll trickle down to 3rd grade. So starting in 3rd grade, TCAP testing will be done digitally. Also, we are required to provide universal screeners to students in grades 2, so 2nd grade and up. Those are directly on the device, and that's Ames Web in elementary and Renaissance Star in secondary, in addition to district benchmarks and CFAs, which are also administered digitally. We had feedback that indicated the appreciation of the committee members in arming them with so much information related to safety, security, app vetting, and how teachers are trained to integrate technology. So we always, it's a big part of the committee, and it's why we've made so many changes along the way, is we are very receptive to what the committee wants. We've changed our timeline several times. We have integrated different pieces in our presentations that they have asked for. We also have always what we call a parking lot, which is where the committee members can write any questions down that they need and that they desire to know more about. And we respond to that either through email or in this month's case, for example, Andy gave part of her presentation was responding to questions that committee members had at the last meeting. So feedback is really important. We ask for it all the time, and the committee is gracious in telling us what they want, because that's really an important part of the work, is to understand what questions they have and to clarify anything before we begin the work of creating that guidance. So that was October, and that's really important work for what we did this month. So again, due to committee feedback, we determined that at this meeting, we would present and review screen time data that we were able to receive from ClassLink. ClassLink is our application dashboard and rostering provider. So when you open your laptop, you're gonna see a screen that has many different buttons. That's ClassLink. So that's our dashboard. They're able to provide us data. So Andy's department took that data provided, and they put the data in a way that could be looked at by grade level, because I know that it was important to our committee to look at it by grade level. We are going to provide this board that same data. I know the 4 board members already have that data, but we're going to provide you that data. We're also going to provide you the PowerPoint presentation that we utilized at the meeting this week, because I think it helps to clarify a lot of the points that you're going to find questions on related to the data. Before you review that data, I do want Andy to take a few minutes to explain some of the background pieces on that data and some of the other components besides the screen time minutes.
Thanks, Jenny. So I just want to talk to you a little bit. So like Mr. Golden said, a third of you have already received the data, and I see that some people are looking at it now currently. So we're going to make sure that everybody receives the data after tonight's meeting, but we wanted to kind of talk you through a couple of different components. We actually spent at least 30 minutes and in time with our committees, spending about 45 minutes really looking at that data. So you're going to receive actually 2 separate packets. The first packet is going to be something that we call our digital profile. And what that's going to do is that's going to break down data by grade level. So for example, it's going to give you a profile of a kindergartner, and it may tell you the percentage of those active kindergartners that are actually logged in, those active users' minutes, and the average time that they spent on a screen during a school day, and then also that's by month. So just know that you're going to have 2 cover sheets on top of that data. So I just encourage you to kind of read those cover sheets pretty slowly because it will define what you're seeing in the data. So the source of the data, like Ms. Lopez says, is provided by ClassLink. So that is our vendor for app management and rostering. But the detail of that grade level data in the packet is not available in real time. While my department and our administrators have a great data dashboard from analytics, from our ClassLink analytics, it doesn't dig in as deep as we'd like for it to on grade level. It's a bigger picture of, across that school or across the district. And so we've had to work with their data scientists to do actually some unique pulls just for the questions that we're getting from our screen time committee. So we took that data and we did a couple of date ranges, and we are focusing on August and September. So this is preliminary. And just know that technology is going to fluctuate over time, right? August is a little lower. We're building relationships with kids. September, it goes up. We're in school for pretty much a full 4 weeks. And then October, it drops again because we're out for a full week of fall break. So technology does fluctuate on a monthly basis. But we started with 2 months with just August and September. But that's really general. On the back sheet, you're going to notice that we actually identified 2 specific weeks, 1 in each month. And so that way you get a more detailed day by day for that grade band. So that's pretty important to know. Also, what I want you to know about that data is that those average daily minutes are captured through the course of a day, not the school day, the entire day. And I know that that's maybe troubling that we can't disaggregate that, but ClassLink doesn't necessarily, they're not necessarily able to get that for us. But also, if we're talking about screen time, in my opinion, I think it's important to talk about all day, right? And including possibly after school and homework and those implications and things like that. So that's the first packet that you're going to get. Grade by grade, you're going to see a lot of data on it, and then you're also going to see the top apps that those students participated in by grade for each one of those months. So for you, we have a cheat sheet. Like sometimes I'll look at something that pops up and I'm like, what is that? I'm not familiar with that one, right? We have a lot of applications. So you're also going to get a separate PDF that's going to be a cheat sheet, and it'll say top apps by grade band. That one's just going to be in alphabetical order, and it's going to give you just a brief description of those applications. So I can tell you, our committee had lots of questions, and they had lots of really good questions, and they had lots of follow-up questions. So as you get this data, I just want to encourage you to reach out. I'm happy to talk you through it. Send me an email if you just have questions. If you want to get together one by one, we can Zoom, and we can really kind of take a deep dive if you want some clarifying information about the data that we present to you.
Thank you, Andy. So our committee really spent a great deal of time. Most of the time we spent was looking at this data in grade bands. So they only, like the groups are, like I've described before, separated into grade bands. They gave us, like Andy said, right on the spot, lots of feedback. We asked them to give us what are your impressions of the data when you look at it? What are the highlights, maybe the things that surprised you, the things you're learning about the data? And then also we had another column with questions. So they had a column for like comments and one for questions. I pulled out some of the comments and questions we had. For example, the group, I spent quite a bit of time listening to them. The high school group was surprised that the number of minutes weren't higher, since the data does include, when you look at high school, those minutes include online learning, so our OLP students, all their time is in there. Vanguard, which is our online school, that's also there. Dual enrollment students work that, some of the dual enrollment classes they do on the computer are in there. And also after school assignments, right? So all of that is included in those minutes. So they thought those minutes were reasonable for the amount of time and all of the different pieces of data that go into those minutes. K5 commented that the minutes in KN1 were very low. Of course, they don't have a one-to-one device, so their minutes are staying very, very low. And then there is a rise in second grade because they have a one-to-one and they utilize it a little more just as a matter of by nature. They take Ames Web. So it would make sense that the minutes would go up automatically there. And of course, they probably spend more time on some apps that K and 1 do not. In 3 through 5, the average minutes are consistent in that grade band, so they don't fluctuate a lot. They also don't fluctuate a lot in 6 to 8. Grade 6 to 8, we didn't get a lot of impressions written down from 6 to 8, but they did have a lot of questions around particular applications and even what subjects use technology the most. And Andy was able to explain that that's a hard data point for us to get to because some apps have both math and ELA, and some have more than math and ELA. So they have multiple content within one app. There are some that it's very easy to tell. For example, Alex is an app that we only use for math. So we know that in that case, that's math usage. But with some other apps, it's more difficult. But they did have a lot more questions related to the particular applications being used. So next steps. So now we've looked at safety, everything we do to vet, everything we do to train our teachers. Then we've looked at minutes and how and what kinds of apps we're using, how we're using applications in the classroom. So the next step is for us to share some research studies, some resources for the committee to review prior to the January meeting, which is the next time we'll meet. It'll be January 8th. So the committee's asked to review this package of resources that I'm going to email them. I have asked our board members on the committee, Melissa Wyatt and Tanya Hipma, to also provide any resources that they want shared with the committee. We want to provide them data and research-based studies and resources that'll help them as they come back and think about what topics specifically they want to include in that technology integration guidance. So my plan is to email the committee by the end of tomorrow to share the PowerPoint for them to review and also to share all the different links and resources for them to prep for that January meeting. So in January, the plan is to spend time discussing the resources as a group, the same way we've been in grade bands, discussing those resources. And this information, in addition to the work that we did in October and November, will guide us in creating that technology integration guideline. So now that's a recap of what we've done in October and November, but I would love to ask our board members that attended the meeting this week if there's anything that I've missed, any detail or any impressions from your experience that you'd like to share. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you. I feel like y'all have done a great job pivoting based on the conversations within the committee and the requests, so thank you for that. I know Andy mentioned that the time that we'll see in those packets, it does include evenings, but it does not include weekends. So just as you're looking at the dates, think about that. And then one question we had, I was sat with the high school grade band for Dr. Webb, is the number of instructional minutes in the day for the students. So I didn't know if we can include that in the email tomorrow for each of the grades. That way when we're looking at total minutes that they're on their devices, you understand how many total minutes they're in class. I thought that could be helpful as well. So, but thank you.
And I don't have anything at this time, so, yeah.
Mr. Golden and Chairman Brown, if I can just add one thing, a couple of highlights. The purpose of a committee is that's really helpful to us is that they can really spend a lot of time focusing in depth on a complex topic. And so if you think about these topics that this committee has taken on and the information that we'll be able to glean from that, they've really had, I'm thinking 5 meetings now, 2-hour minimum per meeting, so 10 hours of in-depth discussion that's really, as I sit as just a fly on the wall in those meetings, it's really enlightening to hear the conversations that are going on. We're excited about the document that'll be provided, but also the conversations that are occurring in the groups are very, very helpful. I want to remind you all that those members that sit on that committee were recommended by you, and I want to thank you for thinking deeply about the people that you recommended to join us on that committee. They are learners. I will tell you, they are thirsty for knowledge. They are sitting in those meetings and they are just soaking in all of this information. They're asking really good questions. And it's from my standpoint as the leader of the TLA department, it's very helpful to us to hear those conversations and to hear that feedback. I also want to just recognize Andy for a second. Andy's a very humble person. She works extremely hard behind the scenes. What she did not tell you was that the data that you will have in front of you, if we're having in front of you right now, is not easy to get. And so I can only imagine that when Andy picks up the phone and she calls our vendors, they act really excited to hear from her, but deep down they're probably not all that excited because she's really pressing hard to make this data more transparent. And I will tell you that she's also working continuously with those vendors to make it even more granular. The committee's asking more in-depth questions about how can we get parent access so parents can see what individual students, how much time they're spending in front of the screen. So Andy's working tirelessly to answer some of those questions and to push on those vendors to get that. So I just wanted to make sure that you all knew that Andy's working real hard to push all that data in front of you.
Thank you all both. I want to add this and then certainly open any additional questions we may have. The committee is a few months removed from any recommendations on screen time. What I've talked to our team about is that deliverable that you all voted on last month as one of the district superintendent and district goals, a K-12 framework with screen time guidelines and developmentally appropriate activities by grade bands. I encourage you, looking back, we probably should have just had the screen up with some of that data as they were presenting so you all could get a glimpse, so I apologize for that. But I do encourage you to look at that when that email comes in. You can scroll through and see those slides. It will give you I think, a pretty quick grasp of grade band time, elementary, middle, high.
Jason, if it's, I know, I do understand the process and that data is not readily available. If we're going to start to kind of gather that information on a regular basis and get kind of a monthly download, it might be helpful to just compare at least one of the weeks, pick a week that's comparable for the elementary school especially, to just get a comparative look to prior year, because we did make that change in 1-to-1 to not, and so I think it'd be really interesting, even for us, but as well as for schools to communicate with their parents as far as changes that they've made from a teaching standpoint in terms of it may show that they had them but they weren't using them, but in reality I bet there's at least a bit of non-use because they're just not as available as they were. I don't know what the answer is, but it'd be interesting to look at the data if it's not too much trouble now that we have the kind of the framework for dropping it
And
in.
Andy was raising her hand right behind your shoulder from my angle.
Mr. Galbraith, I'm really excited to tell you that we did do a deep dive at about the same time last year, 1 week in November and 1 week in December. And I think it's actually this current week. So it'll take me probably until January to have all of that compiled, but we'll be able to do exactly what you just asked, is a deep dive between 2 particular weeks in November and December from last year to this year. It's on our agenda to do.
Great, that's awesome, thank you.
And Jay, you're saying that based on the fact that last year they had them, taking them home every day with them, and this year they don't, yeah, makes sense. Any other Claire?
Yeah. I just wanted to follow up with Dr. Allen. So, because it's a question I wrote down while Andy was talking. So can a parent look right now at their student's screen time on their Chromebook through ClassLink, or question for Andy?
No, ma'am. Currently, right now, they cannot. We are working with ClassLink to see if and how we can make that available. They know that it's a priority for us. We want to make sure that it gets in the hands of our teachers as well. It's really hard to determine screen time when you don't have that dashboard to look at. So we actually have a meeting with ClassLink next week, a one-to-one with them, to see how we can make it available.
All right, thank you so much.
And y'all, I want to share one anecdote that you just prompted. Leadership Franklin and Leadership Brentwood happened to do their education days this month. And yesterday, we spoke to Leadership Franklin, and today we spoke to Leadership Brentwood. We had a question in the Leadership Franklin discussion about screen time. And they were asking where the board was, in essence, where the state is. And one of the comments I gave them was, we've got conflicting issues. I said, for example, the state has let us know that they intend to do elementary TCAP in spring of 2027 on the devices. But here we're talking about the possibility of, managing it and controlling it where there's really exclusively a need. So that's on our mind as well, because we've got those potentially conflicting issues. I'm sorry, Ms. Clements, you may have had a question.
Actually, yeah, I was just going to ask about the TCAP, because I know we talked about
yeah,
that recently, so
that's
you
right.
kind of answered my question
Okay.
that, so third grade, all the TCAPs will be on devices
Yeah, Dr. Allen, can
in
you?
2027, starting 2027, correct?
That is correct. Everything except writing. So grades 2 through 5, as we understand it right now, we've not seen anything in writing, but our assessment analyst is at the table with them. So we believe that that is their direction, 2 through 5, except for writing.
And there's been a similar presentation to superintendents at our annual meetings. I will tell you their whys are, number one, the speed to get the test back. And third grade is a significant component of that because of the what we used to call the third grade retention law. The legislature adjusted that, and so it hasn't been as onerous as we thought it was going to be 3 years ago. And then second, they shared with us that inevitably somewhere across the state, somebody loses a box or two of tests. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that online they won't have that loss. Dr. Allen?
And just one other thing, knock on wood about that losing test. We don't want to be part of that going on. But Dr. Reeves, just to follow up on your question just a little bit. So the granular data is really important to us. We do believe that we'll see a significant difference in screen time just because of some of the strategic decisions that you've made and some of the conversations that are going on across the district. But what we have found, if you heard Ms. Lopez when she was mentioning the amount of time that the committee spent on educating the whole committee on what our current tech integration philosophy is. Standard first, best instructional strategies without technology, only technology if it enhances the learning for the students. That's been our tech integration philosophy for a while. But granular data at the student level, the classroom level, the grade level will allow us to see where do we have an issue, where do we have a hiccup. Oftentimes I'll hear things like, well, my kid is on the screen all day, and so we're scratching our heads saying, well, that's not what we're seeing in some cases, but it's certainly not what our instructional technology and our principals are leading our teachers in. So we really need that granular data to then be able to reinforce some of our practices and policies that we have in place at the building. So we're going to work really hard. Andy's going to work really hard at getting us that data.
Kind of on that note, I did have a question about that. So what criteria or metric is used to determine optimization for when to integrate with tech? How is that determined?
So that is one of the conversations that the Screen Time Committee has been tackling, and what data sources that we're going to look at when we're vetting applications, right? And so not all the applications will be able to just immediately fall back on research. It could just be practice An example that one of our teachers gave in the meeting the other night was using the Chromebook for students to speak into the Chromebook and then hear back them reading to increase fluency at kindergarten and first grade. So sometimes the apps are just practice, but we are, as a result of the Screen Time Committee, already committed to including all of the research studies that wrap around those applications that we would include in the vetting process to approve or not approve.
Totally unrelated to the question, I just have an update. For some reason, our live stream has failed, so our technology department is working on that. The irony of that.
I have one more quick question for Andy. So the top applications, are they ranked? Is it 1 through 10, or is it just top 10 in no particular order?
So when you are looking at the graph next, the little area next to the graphs, those are ranked in order. So if you're looking at the digital profile, those are ranked in order. If you're looking at your cheat sheet where it says top apps by grade band, those are listed in alphabetical order, just so you can find them more easily.
Any other questions on the committee work?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hold on, I do have a quick question about the ranking, because in March of last year, before the budget meeting, I asked for a report about app utilizations, and it basically provided, what was provided for me was just the number of teachers and number of student logins. So are you actually using utilization reports, or are you using how many unique logins there are for the app to rank them?
So for this particular project, when we worked with the data scientists, they actually pulled this for us. So when we pulled for you in March, we pulled it straight off of ClassLink. And for this project, they actually exported those for us. So that's based on the amount of time.
Okay, so actual utilization, not
Yes,
number of logins. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I want to drill down a bit, because we've had this discussion. The utilization would include, for example, if ClassLink is sitting up passively, ClassLink will show up, right? It's that, as an example.
And I guess when y'all, is it possible to just expand the top 10 just a little bit? Because the top 10 get a lot of the kind of the big applications, especially at the high school level. I mean, it's ClassLink, it's Schoology, Google. I'd love to see kind of down the next, however far it needs to go, just to be able to see kind of the McGraw Hills, and to see where those rank, academic
content
areas. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't really want to see all 500, but I think another 10 or top 25 or something like that, I think might get us. And again, that's if it's readily available and not too much trouble. It would just give a lot more information especially for the high schools.
So, Mr. Galbraith, it's funny, I feel like we're on the same wavelength. They've already started with our October polls, and they are pulling top 20 for us. And the way they're pulling top 20 is applications, so the apps that you're actually clicking on the dashboard, but also any URLs or websites. So that's why we expanded it to 20, so that we could go a little deeper.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, I'll just add my thanks to the team, Dave and Andy and everyone on the team, because I know when we create a committee like this, we're creating extra work. So thank you for the great job.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. The final item I want to give you in the superintendent's report is a thumbnail of the budget, and I really want to emphasize thumbnail, just so you all can get just a very early preliminary perspective of where we are with the budget. Rachel?
Thank you, sir. This will be very brief, because the first thing I want to remind you all, you voted on the timeline and the calendar. And the first date that we have, deadline, is tomorrow, actually. And so department heads will finish entering in all of their information requests for this year. And November 26th is the last day. What happens then is I take it all and turn it back to them in a format that we review.
and they'll have time to go back and make any changes. And then the 26th will be the last day. So the next 2 weeks will be super busy for us. And then compile it all together. The first weeks in December 8th and the 15th, is when Mr. Golden and the assistant superintendents will all go through everything and see it all for the first time. So those are the important dates coming up in the next few weeks before we meet again. One thing I wanted to just kind of remind you is this year, the information you have above you or on the screen is this year's information. So in total expenses, we were a $562 million budget, and 85% of that is in salaries and benefits. Operations, as you see, was 81. And so we do expect to see, just with cost of living related to operations, things will increase. A lot of our technology applications will have a slight increase. So we're looking for ways within every department of how to keep this budget as flat as we can. Operations, this includes everything from just 10 million of that, or 11 million of that is in utilities. 10 million of that's in janitorial. Then you get into things like the trustees commission is 5 million of that. Insurance related to workers' comp or risk, that's another 6 million. So that 81 million goes pretty fast. And so I just wanted to remind you of that. What we do know, and this is rough, so I'm going to tell y'all, don't hold me to this. This is rough estimates right now. We would look at the cost of the roll for next year, which I'm reminding you that pay charts have years of experience, teachers roll each year up until 21, and then classified roll on a 5-year increments. That cost would be about $4 million. And then we looked at just roughly today what a 1% raise would cost across the board, and that would be about $3.8 million. I don't know that we're doing, well, the roll we're required to do. The raise, that's just something to think about, but I wanted you to have that in the back of your mind is information to have. Revenue-wise, this is a slide I gave y'all last year, and it doesn't change. It's pretty standard that we get. 60 to 61% is going to come through local, 38% through state. Federal is 0.25 and others 0.75, and I listed those things out. A question has come up related to federal several times, because when I make this statement about 0.25, that's within the general fund budget. We also have a federal budget, which is Fund 142, and this year we've received about $10.5 million. If we lumped all that in together, total federal funding would be about 2% of our revenues that we collect. So again, just wanted to keep you.
Rachel, I want to take one little rabbit trail related to that. That 10 million is the vast majority of it is special education.
About 10 of it, and about $500,000 is related to CTE.
I have a question about the SPED money. Because our district continues to grow in the SPED department, and we kind of have a bigger burden than many other counties because we provide such a good SPED program, is that reflected in the funding at all?
May I ask Ms. Griego to speak on this, but I will say a lot of our funding is still related to, it has fiscal capacity factors that tie in to economically disadvantaged, and we're lower in that regard, so we're not going to receive the funding that others might receive around us.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would add that the vast majority of our special education funding is through local dollars. I mean, we do get about approximately 10 million from the federal government, but the majority of our funding comes from local dollars. Does that answer your question, Tanya? Okay.
But Rachel,
sure.
I mean, so the TISA formula gives more, but then it takes it away because they don't actually give it to us, right?
Correct.
I mean, so it's supposed to
without it, we would get less.
Right.
But within the formula itself, when you really break it down, and I will do that for y'all this year, we really don't get anything from it.
But it's supposed to take our high dollar.
Correct.
SPED.
So it is part of the formula, but when you really look at once you break down the fiscal capacity, we really don't get hardly anything from it. If we didn't have that, though, we would get even less in total. So it's still, I mean, it benefits us, but we're not getting
I just jotted myself a note to run a quick exercise to give you all at some point a raw amount estimate of what we spend on special education services out of this entire budget.
One other thing I do want to bring up too, when we're thinking about revenue, fund balance is not revenue. Fund balance is on the balance sheet, so it's not a revenue or expense. But as a reminder, we used fund balance last year and have traditionally we use it to balance the budget, and it was 67 million last year that we used to be able to fund the budget. Fund balance doesn't just regenerate itself, and so it's just like your savings account. As you spend down, unless there's money coming back in, it doesn't continue to grow. And so we'll have that factor that we do have to consider in this year's budget. The state has not published our audit reports yet, so I can't really speak to it specifically until it is published. I checked this morning, and it's still not on the website. But I can tell you, a lot of times when I look at fund balance, and I believe Mr. Galbraith has asked me this, hey, how did we end up? Did we end up with more? And I will say we did not. We were right on. You have to keep that 3%. So there was no extra, and we've already gone into fund balance as a reminder to pay for the buses. Now we have until the end of the year to get it back up to that 3%, and we'll be able to do that. But we'll have to. That will be a factor this year.
So, but what was the impact? Because we won't feel it until this year, of the change going from what, 98% or
So that was about
$4
$4 million more that we were able to put into the budget, which would be $4 million less that we'll have in fund balance.
So we're going to be starting off $4 million short than we were last year.
That's exactly right. So just as a reminder, when the county commission found a way to get this current year's budget approved, historically they budgeted property tax revenue at 92% of projected. That went up 2 percentage points to 94, and that's that $4 million that Rachel's talking about. And Mayor Anderson, just about every year would say, if we do this is a one-time shot.
Which is coincidentally the amount of a 1% raise.
Yes, it is.
That's exactly right.
So,
and by the way, that's not a coincidence, right? Obviously, right? Yes.
one other thing, just a couple other things I wanted to point out. Property tax, we haven't collected hardly any property tax yet. So this is really, really speaking in terms of historical data. We generally can look at what we've collected and add about 1% onto that for the next year. So when I have projected for 2027, all that is doing is adding 1% onto the budgeted for 26, but we don't actually have our actual collections yet for 26. So we are looking at being able to do that. With a 1%, that would bring in about $1.9 million. So if I had to guess right now, I'd say we're going to get about $2 million more in property tax. And then the same kind of thought process for sales tax. We're running, I've only got a couple of months of sales tax for the year to look at, but it's been about 1.6% more than the prior year. So if I added that on, that would add about another $1.9 million in sales tax. So here's your $4 million. Again, it's odd that we keep coming back to it, but additionally, it looks like there could be about $4 million more in property and sales tax. Way too early to know that for sure.
Which, if that ends up being accurate, is just flat.
Flat. And so all I can tell you is the work has begun and we're in it, and look forward to digging in, and can go ahead and say thanks to all the work that's being done. This afternoon was great. I kept getting little notifications, so people are getting everything entered in.
Rachel, the projection on property tax, which is a projection, is that based on an assumption of 96% or 92%?
94.
94%. That's what it was at last time.
That's what it was at last time. It went from 92
So you're
to
basing it
94.
on them doing 94 again?
Correct.
Okay.
So from a timeline perspective, ultimately, Rachel, trying to give the board the months.
We will present the full budget to you in February, and then you'll have a month to review and vote in March. Again, it's required to be to the county commission by April 1st. So that would be the plan.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chair, I've got one other small thing to mention. The city of Brentwood had a meeting last night with their elected officials and invited the elected officials who represented portions of that area. And I know we had 3 board members there. And Mr. Galbraith actually asked me to mention e-bikes. E-bikes were a common topic that folks were talking about. And and it was something I mentioned, it was something the city of Brentwood mentioned as well. There has been in many of our suburban areas a discussion about the increase in e-bike traffic in those municipalities, and as students ride e-bikes to campus. So we are working with a bit of a task force with city leaders and county leaders, including the sheriff's office, to discuss, number one, what do we need to know about e-bikes? And number two, what can we do to help families make good decisions for their children related to e-bikes? And I know Mike Fletcher is here. He's been participating in that. One of the things I mentioned is that through Carol Birdsong's office, one result from those committee discussions is the schools are working on a PSA with a target audience of our students and our parents to give them some ideas for student safety. And our media programs are actually competing for that. And they're as we speak, during these weeks, working on some draft PSAs. We're going to have somebody win the contest so that we can initiate a communication program with our families about safety issues related to e-bikes. From the municipal side, I can't speak for them in detail, but I know that they are brainstorming over some of their rules and regulations related to e-bikes on sidewalks, et cetera. Board members who were there, is there anything else you all feel like needs to be shared?
I've been going to these for the 7 years that I was on the board before COVID, and then we kind of stopped, and I reached out to the mayor and the city manager to see if we could start them up again, and they did. I guess I would just ask you all to go to your local cities and see if they'll do the same thing. It's been really invaluable to us, to me, and even and the people around the room, just to get to know each other. And I mean, when it establishes relationships. We always have some interlocal things that we're doing that affect, not just the school board and the commission, but the cities. And I mean, our state senator was there, and representatives, usually our congressmen, senators, have some representation. Mm-hmm. They were a bit preoccupied, I think, this week, but it's been great. So I think Brentwood's the only one that does anything like this. They're also the only one, just by the way, that give extra money to our schools over and above. So just go ahead and plug that, as long as you're talking to your cities. But just encourage y'all to see if they will kind of do something similar.
Thank you for that. The discussion we've had about e-bikes has included Spring Hill, Nolensville. Dr. Webb, is any other municipalities involved?
All of the municipalities were either in attendance or in communication with us in regards to this topic.
Yeah. So there are some opportunities for us all to work together as teams. Mr. Chair, that's my report, unless we have any final questions.
Anything further for Mr. Golden? Okay. Let's move on to the operations report. Mr. King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of operation updates. Brentwood Middle School. Remember, we were working on phase 3, which was the outside. That was all that we lacked in that project, and it is completed. Contractor is still working on punch list items and final cleanup, but Brentwood Middle is completed. The Innovation Center, the HVAC system has been installed. The flooring will be completed next week. Kitchen equipment has been delivered and is being installed, and that's for the culinary program that will be run out of that Innovation Center. The final asphalt will be completed by the beginning of December, so everything's running really well with the Innovation Center. And then I do want to mention, because we're talking about the 5-year capital tonight, our phase 2 of our internal fob system and intercom and alert system is going great. It will be completed before the start of the school year next year. And Phase 3, which will be the final phase of that, is in this year's 5-year capital. If we decide to approve that, that will be the final phase of getting all that taken care of. So that's my report. Unless anybody has any questions, be happy to answer.
Questions for Brian?
I just have a quick question. Do we have a list of the schools for the FOB project?
Yes, ma'am. I can send that to you.
Okay,
Yes,
please
ma'am.
send that to me. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. There is no board chair report, so we can go right to new business. First item is approval of the 5-year capital plan, capital improvement plan. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board members, as you know, we presented a draft to you last month. We got some feedback from you related to that plan. And I did want to mention that we actually, as a result of that discussion, pushed back a year elementary projects. Maybe not every one, Brian, I'm trying to remember exactly. Just one elementary project. So I refer you to the top section related to new buildings. With right now our projection for any new school, the most up and coming new school is projected to open no earlier than fall of 2030, which is 5 years from now. Now the reality is, as you know, we look at this annually, and so there's a possibility that that could extend. Also, there was a question that came up that Rachel worked on. The detail of the question was, I think there was an ask, how much did we actually have in our intent to fund needed for the current year versus what we ultimately asked the commission for? So to just give you an idea, in 2024-25, we had in our 5-year cap plan an ask of $55.5 million. We actually delayed some of the request and made a request for just under $30 million. So 60% or so is what we actually asked for. The year before that, it was the exact same number we told the commission we might ask for. The year before that, it was $1 million off. So especially this past year, we did defer some of our ask of the county commission. So open to any questions you all may have. I know Brian invited you all to ask questions over the course of the month. We had a really good detailed discussion about it last month, but we are open to any questions you may have. Just as a reminder, we do focus the county commission on this year's column and what we will be asking for.
So, Jason, have a few questions around this, and some of this is presentation. But would it make sense to move the addition, the 22 classroom additions, up to the top, like where it would be new buildings and additions? So basically all the things that we're adding, new classrooms or new space, whereas the rest of these are just all renovations. And so I think it might make more sense as we're talking to the commission, like, hey, these are things that are based on growth and need. These are the things that are, this middle section is really just based on age and maintenance. So that just a...
It's not a bad idea. Yeah. It'd be,
so-
new space versus old.
Right.
Yeah, not a bad idea at all. We could do that.
And I mean, obviously I guess my next question around that would be, as you looked at 26 and 27, I mean, granted, these are all starting out in 29, 30, or, potential start dates out in 29, 30, 31, but given the, and I'd like for you to show, if you don't mind, just tonight, the what you sent us this afternoon, because I think that would be really helpful for the public to see. But what are you prepared to say that we need, that right now, if we were gonna be asking for to start projects, would you say that we were gonna request that the county commission start all 5 of these projects? Or, well, I guess the first one, the Performing Arts Center, I presume, have we already done the intent to fund on that first $1 million?
Actually, we have not.
Okay.
So for this year, in the current budget year, we do intend to ask for that $1 million to do the planning work, the architectural work for Spring Station.
Okay. And then, but then what about the rest of this 25, 26?
For the other intent to funds, I anticipate that based on the timing of this, with the intent to fund needed in 26, 27, we will have one more discussion of the 5-year capital plan before we actually make a request of the commission.
So we won't really do that until next fall?
Until the middle of the year,
Okay.
at best. It will give us one more year of actual enrollment numbers. And so that we had that discussion about the timeline of Eric's work still being 1 year out.
Okay. Because I just want to, I'm just interested in thinking through as you look at the makeup of the county, whether or not whether or not in the next 12 months we're going to need to start talking about potential rezonings of some places that are over. I know Mill Creek is one of those that's been, we never did the rezoning from Nolansville Elementary that we said we were going to do 7 years ago on the heels of the last rezoning, and so just want to be thinking ahead about that.
Thank you for that, Brian. Rachel?
One thing I would say is Hillsborough and Grassland, we've already last year had partial intent to funds. So we were planning on coming a little bit earlier with that because the work has already started to see if we'd be able to finish that project
And
out.
those are the renovations.
Correct, and
Yeah.
renovations. And then the same thing with the lights. We are looking at going ahead and asking for that because of the extensiveness of the project. So the other things, we would wait until probably closer to the end, April, May, which is when we did it last year. But there are a few things that we kind of want to go ahead and look at in January with you all and then take it to them in February.
Sounds good.
And Mr. Galbraith, as to your questions about rezoning, I've had some discussions with individual board members with particular areas, and I will tell you this, there is a possibility that we may be asking for rezonings in the Nolansville and Page areas, not this fall not for this coming fall, but for the next, based on our projections.
Okay. Well, and yeah, I think that's based on the pictures and the numbers, that makes sense. I guess I would, so when you present this to the county commission, you're not planning on telling them necessarily. You think that you're going to have another cycle before we actually kind of on this 32.5, the 32.5 million for 26, 27. You think you're going to see enrollment from next year before you're really going to kind of put pen to paper on.
That's correct.
On what you recommend there.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
I think that's fine. And that's important to note. Like, hey, we're evaluating this, but we're only going to recommend that we do it if we need to, which I think is appropriate. And I think I asked this. I don't know if I got an answer, but last year and this year, the two middle schools, the Split Log and Cox, I think they both have. We own the land on both of them, I believe.
That's correct.
And why is one of them $8 million more than the other?
Eric,
it's not just Brentwood, I promise.
Yeah. Eric, I know generally speaking, it's related to some site work that would have to happen. But Eric, can you speak to that?
It's a rock, yeah. That is true. That's fair.
And by the way, just because Eric's comment didn't reach a microphone, Eric, would you mind?
There's extensive. There we go. There's a lot more. There's a lot of grading work behind behind Jordan Elementary.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that got on there.
There is a large mountain.
Yeah.
And that's why, if you notice, we had pulled out $10 million up front to potentially do the grading work ahead of time. So that's why it's larger, and that's why that number's set out in front.
And I will tell you, the growth and the pinpoint accuracy that our system will give us related to where the students are is going to drive those, the timeline of those two middle schools, where the greatest need's going to be.
Well, it is always hard when we're having to make funding decisions, 4 years out.
Yeah.
So, so it's always going to be a bit of speculation, but you can explain it if you don't mind it.
And thank you, Tim. Thank you for getting that. Whoever forwarded that on to Tim, thank you. So just so everybody knows, and I know you all as board members got this email a few hours ago. You may not have all had the opportunity to look at it. You all, and I know Mr. Galbert, you specifically mentioned, hey, do some heat maps that shows our enrollment numbers, and so the red represents our high schools that are 90% or higher capacity. The yellows represent 75 to 90%, and the greens represent under 75% of their capacity. So this happens to be the high school map. You all have this emailed to you. We will make sure we post this as well. Again, this is just for this year, right? Because this is actual enrollment as of end of first month. And then if you could pop down to the middle school, just so everybody gets a glance. Nope, you jump to elementary, there you go, middle school. You can see what we're talking about, right, with those numbers. And by the way, Sunset Middle is at 83% capacity, so it's still in the yellow, but it's at 83. And then, tell me when y'all are ready for the elementary. A little bit more confusing because we have so many more elementary schools, but you can see those red spots. I will tell you a trend, and I mentioned, I think in my email, that these give you a good snapshot, but you really need to look at trends as well. Arrington, if I'm not mistaken, it's still in the yellow, but it's maybe at 87%? Yeah, so that one is noticeably growing, and we have all that data on the far right of these slides. So thank you for the prompt for that, by the way. Just the glance just gives you a really good look.
This was excellent. I don't know what my expectations were that it was going to look like, but there's always some surprises. But this is really great view, for much better than the percentages, especially for our commissioners to understand that we, if you go back to the middle school number, it's we're talking about on our list, those two middle schools we were talking about is between Woodland and Sunset, and of course if you combine Mill Creek and Sunset, those are all over 90%, and so you've got one in between Woodland and Sunset, and then Cox Road is down there in the Page Middle School section where we do continue to have a lot of growth. So
that's right. And then next door to Page is Legacy, that's in the green.
That's right.
And
The
Mr.
least
Golden, I would
populated
like to
middle school.
remind everybody that we will have the updated capacities for middle school. We've finished that work. Heather Hayes and Eric went out to every middle school, mapped it out. Those numbers have been in there a long time, so it'll be updated. It's not a lot of change, but there is some change in some of the schools. So you'll see those new numbers soon.
Change to the good.
Overall, change to the good, but some of the schools actually reduced capacity because when this was done years ago, programming has changed since the numbers were put in there years ago.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that was factored in, and that's why we had Heather Hayes from the instructional side work with Eric on that to make sure that we were getting an accurate capacity number. So we'll get that to you.
One question, Jason, based on something Jay was mentioning about the timing of when we fund these things.
Yes.
How far into a fiscal year can you get approval and realistically start the project in that same fiscal year?
Rachel, I'm going to ask you to speak to that after I give this answer. That's usually driven by a conversation with county government as to how they want to fund it, and if it's a bond, when they intend to go to bond market. I have seen it vary from time to time depending on how they want to fund it. So, for example, the impact fee, the educational impact fee, if they have funding sitting there ready, and they choose to fund it with that, it's a month. If they are going to bond market, we need to find out their schedule for that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that I asked the question is because if you think about it, numbers can be in this column for a certain fiscal year, but if you push it out far enough in that fiscal year and you get the intent to fund approved, you're not starting it until the next fiscal year.
That's right. And there are also some dynamics for those of you who watch the commission. If we're making a request 2 months before the operational budget, they're going to be asking questions tying that to operational. And so they might say, well, let's wait till we make an operational decision to decide how they fund it as well. So usually when we're doing that planning, we have conversations with the mayor and the finance department to figure out from a timing perspective what's best based on the schedules that Eric or Adam have if it's a maintenance project.
One other observation I'll make is that I think the first year that I was on the board and I saw this plan, the total of all the 5 years combined was about over $900 million. Again, we all know it's a projection, it's not a commitment. I think if my math is right, that number is what, 600 plus million now, 650?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Pretty dramatic reduction.
Yes, but we've cut it by about a third.
Yeah, pretty dramatic.
And I will say some of those are almost annual cost of doing business, right? A lot of the work that Adam and his maintenance team does, we have to maintain that every year. We have too many facilities not to do some of that capital work every year.
So Jason, I think this is where I put my annual plug-in for, you know where I'm going with this?
Yes, sir, I do.
Am I jumping ahead? I'm on. We always do our zoning as a top-down, as it was laid out 16 years ago. And so we're taking the biggest chunks and then fitting it in backwards as opposed to, or vice versa.
Yeah.
As opposed to zoning upwards, and where we can really micro-target the kids and the neighborhoods and everything else and get them more locally so that by the time they do get to the high schools, there's much cleaner theater patterns, the numbers are smoother, there's more full capacity across it. It just would have been a better way to do it. And I realize, we got to start from scratch if we do that, but it would give us a lot more flexibility in that if we had way back when been smart enough and sort of done it the opposite way.
Thank you for that. And I will tell you, this one even has the potential to be middle school driven, not elementary, potentially, based on what we've seen with numbers. One of the things we will probably be asking you all about maybe this spring or summer is what are your priorities? Because it's been years, really, since we've talked about that. Clean feeder patterns, minimize split feeder patterns. Sometimes that's an issue, and so we may not just, for example, recommend rezoning middle school, but look at how that feeder pattern goes from elementary up to middle to high.
So I have a couple questions. How much money is in the education impact fee?
Ooh, boy.
Do you all
Rachel's
know?
shaking her head no. I don't know either. I tell you what, we'll check on that and let
Okay.
you all know.
I think it's $75 million.
75. Okay, so 75 to 80 million is a guess, but I'm sure you are pretty close. To piggyback off of even what Jay and Eric have said, our enrollment overall is declining. However, we have these hot spots.
That's right.
And if we're going to rezone, I would like to recommend that we start talking about it in January to try to get ahead of it so that our families know it's not for August of 26, 27. It would be August of 27, 28, especially if even our first school might not even, realistically, it's probably going to be 30, 31. So that's just something I would, and I do like the idea of us giving you priorities, because I know feeder patterns. I know we've gotten emails about, like, one neighborhood, they'll go to this school with these friends, and they go to this school, and those friends go to another, like,
Right.
you know, trying to keep kind of neighborhoods together. And but I would like to recommend that we not put that off too far, because I think if we can get ahead of it and give our families some input in it, and it won't be like what happened to my little neighborhood in Nolensville, where, you know, we were told in March we were going to rezone in August, and it was just, I think we deserve, our community deserves better than that, so.
Thank you for that. You've prompted a couple thoughts. Number one, if we start talking a year and a half out, that's an extra window for open zoning. So that could potentially motivate individual families to make a decision a year ahead. Another prompt that you gave me is typically having that discussion start in November or so for the coming year, where we're 7 months out, is we have found that generally speaking that's a good start, but letting folks know it's probably going to come the next year is wise.
To that point, or were you were finished? I'm sorry. To that point on the rezoning, if we how this plays in, because you almost have to wait until the fall to see what recommendations we're going to make for new schools, because if we are building a new school, then rezoning those kids away isn't really the preferred method. Like we tend to squeeze and add portables for that time to deal with if we're going to be adding a school or doing an addition, as opposed to rezoning them for 3 years and then sending them back. So we tend to be able to squeeze like we have at Mill Creek for a while, but
right.
I mean, it gets to a point where when you're 120% over capacity, you kind of have to do something.
Yeah. And final bit that's very particular to two locations, Thompson Station and Mill Creek's building designs give a little bit of flexibility that's not great, but it's functional, where middle school might borrow some elementary classrooms or vice versa. I will say that does not work at Sunset. For those of you who've been in the building, you know why, because you walk in and then you go to the wings and they're too far apart.
Okay. The next item is approval of the 2026-27 calendar, including the early release and late start days, and then the 2027-28 calendar as well. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm about to refer to Dr. Webb, who leads our calendar committee, with a couple of prompts. Number one, you all have already approved the 26-27 calendar. We have added the proposed early release and late start days, which you did not vote on last year. And then we have the upcoming calendar for you all to consider as well. If I'm not mistaken, actually, Mr. Galbraith, you mentioned this last night to some folks in Brentwood. I think this is going to be, Dr. Webb, our third year of having two calendars, maybe or just our second.
It's our second year.
Second year, to help our families plan a little bit better. So, Dr. Webb, if you would speak to some of the particular items that the calendar committee worked on that may be those key points for the board to consider before their Monday vote.
Very good. Thank you. The calendars that you see before you are very similar to this current school year calendar. In fact, for the upcoming school year for 26-27, very few shifts in addition, and outside of the addition of the early release late starts that mirror what our current practice is. There's also in that calendar a shift in how we're utilizing one of our teacher professional learning days, but it doesn't affect the substance of the calendar. And the 27-28 calendar, again, it's very similar. The basic structure mirrors our current school year calendar. Both of the next 2 year calendars do not have teachers returning outside of new hires. The teachers don't return until August. We do have one change in 27-28. We have an additional election day. There's a March presidential primary. So we will have an additional day that the calendar committee is recommending that no school and teachers are present on campus for that high expected turnout day. And those are the major shifts. There is in 27-28 one additional teacher admin day shift that takes place around winter break, but those are the only major changes that you'll see in these two calendars. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions?
So I see the early release days are still on Wednesday, and I think Claire's talked about Fridays. Is there any way, like what might keep us from moving those to Fridays instead of breaking up? I just know if I had an elementary school student, Wednesday would be not very convenient for me.
Dr. Webb, I know Dr. Oyer isn't here tonight, but can you speak to that and the discussions the committee had?
I can. The committee spent quite a bit of time speaking about early release and inclement weather, and those were two topics that we brought to them, actually from a school board work session where those topics were brought up. There were three primary reasons that the calendar committee elected to keep the early release in the same places as they currently are. The committee believed that midweek was a better place for teacher planning. There was a fear that having the Friday half-day could lead to a long extended weekends where students would not attend for the half instructional day on those days where they would fall. And there was conversation about how families are currently utilizing those Wednesday early release for afternoon appointments that may not exist in the same capacity for Friday afternoons. Those were the three main reasons. And then in regards to inclement weather, we did discuss the fact that we haven't used 10 inclement weather days in the last several years. Well, in the most recent history, we haven't used all of them. So we spent some time talking about the pros and cons of leaving the 10 inclement weather days versus having a small reduction. So as a reminder, the state of Tennessee requires that we attend school for 6.5 hours a day. We go an additional 37. 30 of those minutes are stockpiled, and we use for a total of 13 instructional days. We add 3 of them to the instructional calendar, so we actually attend 177 days, and then we stockpile for 3, which the state allows, and then we have 10 inclement weather days that come from the most additional minutes as a part of that 30. Then we attend an additional 7 minutes every day, and those stockpiled minutes are utilized for early release and late start. So in regards to the inclement weather, the recommendation of the committee is to continue with the 10 days. There was a lot of conversation, and I know Dr. Oryer's not here this evening, but a lot of conversation in regards to elementary, and that any reduction of instructional minutes for an inclement weather day would be approximately 2.5 to 3 minutes that we would lose for each additional day that we took off of the 10 for inclement weather. The feedback from our elementary teachers was that the gain isn't worth the loss. They didn't want to lose any instructional minutes and take away. And then our parent rep kind of echoed the likelihood that families, if we did happen to go over the 10 or have an excess of our stockpiled inclement weather days, the likelihood is that families would, since they already had those vacation planned, to go ahead and take them, and there would be a loss of potential instructional minutes there too. So for those reasons, the recommendation of the committee ended up being, with a heavy conversation around elementary, to keep early release in the middle of the week and to keep the inclement weather days stockpiled at 10 days.
And my last question is fall break, because I had some constituents ask about that. It is aligned with like the end of the first quarter. That's accurate?
That's right.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I told
Yep.
them, because they were like, can't you move it up a week? And I'm like, well, I think it's, no.
Well, you're exactly right. That is the reason. It's at the end of the 9 weeks.
One additional thing I wanted to add is that early childhood does not attend on Wednesdays as well, and so that does help for the early release to be on the day that we don't have early childhood.
And as an aside, I got to jump back to an old one since you mentioned early childhood. TISA does not fund early childhood. It's not included in their analysis at all. So that's largely on us with a little bit of support from the federal funds we have.
Oh, actually, I do have one more. Oh, go ahead. And then I'll go.
Isn't early childhood funded by the state?
It is funded in part by the state, but Marie, if you would speak to early childhood, I want to make sure we've got some clarity too for folks who watch this. We call our preschool special education services program early childhood. At the state level, they typically call it something like special education pre-K or some version of that. So when we're talking to folks at the state level, they might not know what we're talking about when we say early childhood, as opposed to voluntary pre-K. It's interesting, Marie actually spoke to this to the Leadership Franklin group yesterday. So Mr. Cash, when TISA was created, they did not include the number of students in early childhood or special education pre-K in the numbers. So when they count our numbers of students and who they fund, they do not fund any for those students via TISA. We do have some funding for that. And Maria, could you speak to that?
Yeah, so that we have two different sources of funding. We have a very small budget that comes from the IDEA preschool budget, so those are federal funds. It is very, very small and limited amount of money. And then we do, in the last maybe 3 years, we have a state preschool grant that we get for preschool at the elementary level, early childhood level. And that funds a part of our early childhood programs, but not nearly all of them.
There's two different early childhoods.
That's correct.
This is for special needs.
That is correct.
Ours is specifically for special needs.
That's right. And every school system has that, but when they count the number of students enrolled for TISA purposes, those don't count.
Do we know, like, just off the top of the head, like what the enrollment is for that, or like a rough
Including
count?
peers, it's about, it's around 600?
By the end of the year, it will be probably close to 500.
Okay, I'm a little
Right
high.
now, I think it's somewhere around 250, 300 students.
Times 2, or that's the actual?
That's total.
Okay. And the moment a child reaches the age of 3, we start serving them.
Gotcha, yeah.
And that also doesn't account for all of the evaluations we do, that students may choose another option or may choose to stay with TEIS.
Yeah.
Sorry for taking that digression. It just hit me. I know, Mr. Chair, Dr. Johnson may have had another question related to the calendar.
Just one other thing that's been brought to my attention is moving the graduation window to make sure that our student athletes who compete in state and track and field, and I know it affected our baseball team and I know it's probably just a few schools that happen to do their graduation like the night of, but if we could move that back, I think one day it would actually take care of it. But look at those TSSAA calendars, because it's disheartening that a scholar athlete has to decide between competing at state or going to a graduation.
Yeah.
And like the track meets had been at MTSU, and literally we had 2 or 3 at Nolensville graduation run in.
Yeah.
But this year it's going to be at Knoxville, so there's no way. So if they compete at state, they'll have to choose.
Dr. Webb, I know we've had some discussions about that. Can you give the board an update on those discussions?
Yes, to Dr. Johnson's point, TSSAA sets those each year, and so the location did change. We have spoken with our principals about reviewing those calendars as they place their graduation dates. So I'll have that conversation with them again. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Just circling back on the early childhood funding, I know you said that we use the federal funds and the state grant. What's the percentage that's covered, and then I just kind of, is it, how much, what's the difference there? And what do we
Maria may
cover?
have a better idea than me. I'm going to say it's substantially less than 50%, but I don't know that I have a good number.
That would be correct. I couldn't give you an exact percentage. I can get it for you.
Yeah, we'll get that. That's a good point. We need to get that so we have those discussions. I will say also, TDOE sent a survey out to superintendents about elements, and I know you and I had a discussion about this, about elements of the TISA formula. I focused on two things in my response to the survey. One, their communication, because when they tell us that that the TISA base is $7,400, it's not $7,400. That is the base before they take out the local share. And I shared in detail, please correct your communication so that you don't represent that every LEA is getting that money. And then the second piece was early childhood or the special education pre-K. Factor in those student numbers in your TISA formula.
Okay, any more questions on the calendar?
So, Jason, I just, talking about the early childhood made me think about the enrollment numbers that we used for, did you include early childhood in those capacity percentages?
Yes, at those schools that we did, that early childhood is there, we did include those in the
That's fine.
percentages.
I know sometimes we report
Yeah.
it with and without,
Yeah.
but that's good to
Yeah,
know.
and by the way, when we report that, and we have this posted on our website as well with the end of first month, we show both numbers. Because for budgeting purposes, we do not include early childhood or voluntary pre-K in our total number because of the way the state counts them. But in actuality, we have those students. So we include both in our reports.
All right, let's move on to board policies. First one is policy for first reading, 3.210, naming of facilities. I don't know if you want to go to you, Jason,
yes.
or Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Whatever you prefer. Ms. Osbrooks is out tonight. So for first reading, we have naming of facilities. We brought to you some recommendations related to naming a portion of school facilities, and that detail is there. I know that the policy committee had some discussion about it, and it includes some recommended guidelines related to naming things after individuals, and also financial contributions. The net of this, and Dr. Webb, I know you and your team worked on this in quite a bit of detail, is that this would require board approval within all these guidelines before there was a particular naming of a portion of a campus. I don't know if there's any detail you want to share.
The only thing that I would add is that we already started collecting, I think it was Mr. Galbraith who brought up, we do have some internal, over time, some internal and external portions of our school facilities that are currently named after individuals, and so we have started collecting those from each school site so that we'll be able to present to you what's already been named, just for your informational purposes as well, and then we'll keep a running log of those as you approve them.
Just want to speak to this one for those who weren't at the policy meeting, but it was news to me, and I mean, things like this kind of fall through the cracks sometimes. But it was news to me that I know some of the names of at least of the facilities that I'm familiar with that have been named, and it just never crossed my mind that the board hasn't approved these. We name all the schools, but we just haven't been a part of that naming process, and it puts a tough burden on staff to not have structure on how to do this. So this is a really clear, and I just want to make it clear that while the board chooses a name for these, all we're going to do with respect to approving these names is approving them with respect to the qualifications that we give. So all we can do is we could deny one, but we can't propose another name. It's usually not the way that these things are coming in front of us anyway, but that's just going to be that's the process that's laid out here.
I can remember, it seems like 2 years ago, we built like 2 schools. One was Arrington Elementary, right? And then Amanda
North.
So it seems like I was a part of the process, and I don't know if I was chosen to be on the subcommittee, but there was a process that we had to choosing the naming of the school. So can somebody refresh my memory on how that occurred?
That is correct. The policy calls for a naming committee, and they meet, and there's detail in there. They submit I appoint a naming committee composed of board members, county commissioners, and WCS staff members, and then there's some detail related to the work with some restrictions. You don't name it after commercial developments, et cetera. And then the committee goes through getting community input and then makes recommendations to the board, which includes a list of 2 or 3 names and the justification. And so that's what happened with the Amanda North Elementary in Arrington as well.
Thank you.
But this policy would also include, it would change it where, like, if they named an auditorium or they named a stadium, it would also go through the same process. Is that?
Yeah, very similar process, yes,
similar.
ma'am. Yeah.
Well, I guess not very different.
Well,
different
it's a different
Yeah,
process,
so
but-
there wouldn't be a committee for that. It's essentially, they'll go through. It'll come to us, but not for the, that's correct. Like it'll essentially go, the school will meet, and however they decide if it's, a lot of time it might be a donor, it might be just an alumnus or some community member. It'll end up going to the assistant superintendent, and then Julian Lee will make a recommendation to us, is essentially how it's
Yeah.
written.
Take it to me, and our leadership team would make a recommendation to you. We anticipate it's largely going to be driven by the school level to us.
All right, so that one will be on first reading on Monday. The next one is also on first reading is 4.600, report cards and grading systems.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can see on page 3 of 5 of this, this is some detail related to some proposals that we have related to transfer GPAs and recalculation. You may recall that we had some discussion with some students transferring and their ranking related to valedictorian and salutatorian, and our concern related to the University of Tennessee scholarship process for top 10%. And so we have some proposal here to number one, communicate with everyone on the front end via policy, the standards that we have for transfers. And then number two, make sure that we're as fair as we can for students to qualify for those scholarships that, again, was largely driven by the University of Tennessee, giving admission, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Webb, to the top 10% automatically. So Dr. Webb, can you speak to that?
Absolutely. That was a change that was new for us in the state of Tennessee last year, and it's guaranteed admission for that top percentage of each graduating class. And so this gives us the continuity to ensure that we're reviewing and submitting those students consistently for that guaranteed admission. And it also, by adding this procedure into the board policy, it makes it clear to families who are transferring in what that procedure looks like and how their GPA is specifically calculated. This information largely is currently in our high school programming guide, but it seems like it's such a huge impact to someone who's moving here with an established GPA from another school district from anywhere across the country. We agree that it's important enough that it should be in school board policy.
Any questions? Okay, that one we will also vote on Monday night for first reading. The next one is our one policy for second reading that we'll vote on Monday night, and that's 6.312, use of wireless communication devices.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, you all know that there's been quite a bit of discussion related to this. The board at first reading had a vote in which there was an adjustment that was taken to the policy committee. And Mr. Chair, I know you often refer to those who have brought this policy. I do want to point out that Dr. Reeves originally brought this policy with the detail that's included in your packet, and certainly open to any discussion the board may have related to that.
Claire, do you want to speak to it first, or you want to just open it up? All right. Any questions or comments? Dennis?
I did some research on the topic. Oh, sorry. Going back to September, I started doing some deep research on it, and I've completed the device policy in the 95 counties of Tennessee. I have that here. I was surprised the large number of bell-to-bell that already exists. 38 of the 95 counties already have a bell-to-bell, and there's a couple of counties that are changing from partial restriction to a bell-to-bell. But no one who has bell-to-bell is reversing that. Then I did the 50 states and Washington, D.C., and got those numbers. And it's about 60-40, 60% have some kind of policy, about 40% actually have the stricter bell-to-bell. And we just got a notice tonight, maybe some of you did, there was 27 states, 5 more states have come on board. And it looks like they're gonna go bell-to-bell. So it looks like the policy nationwide is becoming stricter. I was stunned when I found that Washington, D.C. has an absolute bell-to-bell. And then I found out it was to handle the crime among the juvenile population more than any brain damage. But California has it, New York State have it, and they have a very strict bell-to-bell, and they represent, about 9 million students, or about 18% of the total student body in the U.S. So it was kind of interesting, and then I went and I looked at the world, because actually UNESCO tracks student cell phone use worldwide. It's different. Very few partial restrictions. They are almost exclusively bell-to-bell. And that's if you look at, Russia, China, things like that. Africa. I liked Indonesia. The teachers can take the phone and destroy it. That seemed. Saudi Arabia, they cut your hand off. Saudi Arabia has the highest per capita use of cell phones of any kind. I was there for a year, and I remember that.
Are you offering that as an amendment?
No, I'm just saying it was very interesting. The European nations tend to go with a partial restriction, where Africa, Asia, Middle East, they tend to go with a stricter. So it's the reverse of here. Here we tend to be partial more than we are bell-to-bell, 60-40, but in other countries it's a little different. So and then I looked into the what actually happens to your brain on cell-to-cell. I'm now up to 44 changes in the human brain by using a cell phone if you use it improperly. Anything more than 2.5 hours a day is, you start getting in the yellow zone. The American students use it 7 to 9 hours a day. Using a cell phone more than 1 hour a day cuts the adolescent cognitive ability by 50%. So I couldn't do the negative math. If 1 hour costs you 50%, what does 7 hours cost you? So it was interesting. I put it all together. I just didn't realize it was such a big topic, because I thought we were just looking at it here in Williamson County, but it's a big issue. I did reach out to a woman, professor of psychiatry, University of California, San Diego. She's written over 200 articles. For 25 years, she's been tracking cell phone changes in the adolescent brain, written a bunch of books and stuff. So I reached out and she returned my call. We had a nice conversation. And she supports a bell-to-bell restriction even for high school. And we also had the other doctor, Dr. Gupta, the local person. So That's just kind of what I found out. Very interesting topic. It seems that most places are becoming more restrictive, not less restrictive. And it comes down to the science, the medicine, the psychiatry, the behavior, versus the parents who want to keep contact with their kids. That's what I found out.
All right, anyone else?
Okay, I guess I'll go next. I just have a couple of things. I just wanted to highlight a few things from Dr. Gupta, the email that she sent the board on November 3rd, because it brought some things to my mind. So she's a pediatrician and a digital wellness researcher from the Freedom Foundation. She's also located here in Franklin, so she probably sees our students who have issues with, digital wellness. And I just wanted to note that just what she said, I've witnessed firsthand the impact of wireless mobile devices on student learning, on their attention, emotional health, and school culture, not just when devices are used, but when they are even present. And she points to her academic review article, and that's what she summarizes in the email that she gave us. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but just I think two points that I wanted to remind everybody about is about the distraction of phones. And there's the internal pull, which is the endogenous distraction, which is the attention it's drawn to the device because we're craving the dopamine. And then the exogenous distraction, which is the external pull because of alerts, notification, app cues. And that reminded me of when we were sitting in the policy meeting and Dr. Webb was kind of summarizing the student committee that met with Jason Golden. And the students were, affirming that we really liked the current cell phone policy because, we could just drop the things in the little cell phone cubbies and then retrieve them at the end of class. And they were, saying, it was really helpful because otherwise, we get distracted. And I'm just going to paraphrase because that was a couple weeks ago we talked about that. But we might go into our backpacks to, because we want to see them. So we like that we have that policy set in place. But when I evaluated those thoughts from those students, instead it made me realize that actually these students are addicted to their phones. They crave that dopamine. They want to go in their backpack. Because I was actually thinking, if we went bell to bell, just let the kids have some autonomy, let them have some responsibility and put it in their backpacks. But apparently, I'm not sure now that I would go that way if we went bell to bell, because of the distraction that just the device's presence gives to our students. And then another thing I wanted to point out was the motivation and gratification. And that's when students earn gratification from effort and mastery in class, motivation rises. So that's an internal validation from, doing the hard work yourself, and just the desire to, the satisfaction and the motivation that gets children to start to love learning. And that's replaced when the dopamine is the reward because of the devices. Then the motivation for academics falls. And this is all from Dr. Gupta. And then she says, these devices are designed to compete with and often override the satisfaction that should come from learning. And so in that regard, as a former teacher and just as a grandmother and raising kids, that was one of my goals, and that is the goal of every teacher, is we can be a facilitator or we could be a teacher, and the teacher's job is to teach students, just to have passion, to share your passion for history or for science with the kids, and just get them to start to love learning and to think critically and to contemplate, because in our busy world there is not a lot of time set aside for deep thinking. And I think even now, especially with cell phones and all the technology with AI, that it is really important that our students learn or have the opportunity to have an environment where they can think critically and not have the distraction of cell phones. And I look at the Waldorf School that's the school that all the tech kids go to and the employees, because those kids or those parents, they realize that the apps that they create and all of these devices are very addictive, and they want their kids to experience real books and engage in all their senses and things like that. And so they understand it, and they want their kids to think critically. And so, I look at them and what they know, and I think we should follow suit. And then the last thing on her paper or her email was our constant online connectivity is not harmless. It rewires our brains. It leads to shortening attention spans and a diminished capacity for deep thinking. In a screen-saturated world, our schools can be the sanctuary for focus, calm, curiosity, and community. So I just wanted to, just highlight some of those things as we think about that. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about was on Monday, we had Dr. Reeves had requested the raw data about the parent questionnaire. And so I wanted to ask Melissa if she could tell us, because she was the one that initiated that when we were in our tech committee work session. And I think it's really important for her to explain why she did it, because I thought it was a good idea. And I know in a lot of that research, the technology committee has talked about with the committee. And I'm gonna share some of those things, because I took that raw data and just laid it out in a linear information. So Melissa, can you just share a little bit for the board and for everyone listening?
If I may just add one caveat, when you're talking about the raw data, just make sure you don't tell a particular family story that might be personally identifiable, just as a reminder.
Sure. And the timeline for that collection, I'm looking at Andy to make sure I have this correct, is that we met in July and talked about how important it would be to just have an opportunity for families to be in touch with the district. Initially, we were thinking, oh, you'll let your principal know, but then we were like, that's a lot on the principals, right? Then to turn around and get it up to Dr. Webb and Dr. Oyer. And so we thought, what if we just collected all of it, and the way it was designed, we could tell what grade level the students were in. So we collected the data, I think, for about 3 weeks. Is that right, Andy, that it was open?
Miss Wyatt, I'm looking those
Okay,
dates
thank you.
up, so you keep going, I'll get
but
those
just,
for you. Yeah.
And it was timed with when when it came out from the communications department about the change in policy for the year, and then I think went through the first 10 days or the first 2 weeks of the school year. So that way it just was available to parents, and they could say, these were their initial thoughts, and if they wanted to hop back on and share again, how it has felt in their family. So that's the timeline of when the data was collected. But I was really glad that we did it. I think high touch, high communication, and just giving parents that easy access really mattered, and I was glad to hear about the responses that we got, that we received. Thank you. Sorry.
It was sent, it was actually communicated in Focus through our communications department, and it opened on July 25th, and then it closed September 3rd. So it was longer than just a few weeks.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So if that helps with the timeline that it was available.
Yeah.
That feedback.
Yeah, and then I just wanted, before I go into this what I've compiled here, is just to ask Dave Allen about was it the Foresight School? Did I get that name right? Okay, good. I had to ponder that this afternoon. Yes. So can you tell us a little bit about when our little group was together and you had showed us the website of the Foresight School, and tell us about the characteristics of it, because it's very similar to ours, and that's why you pulled it up. And then I know you shared it with the board, and I thought before our work session, maybe you could share it again. But if you just speak to that a little bit, because that all showed a very similar, I want you to explain this, but just show a very similar school or district to ours, and how they laid out to the families their unplug thing, because they have a bell-to-bell policy, and how they make it work. So if you could just add a little bit more for us, that would be
so
appreciated.
Thank you for that lead-in. So Forsyth County, Georgia is just outside of Atlanta, one of the school districts that's in our benchmark consortium that we work closely with, and they do a great job, and we learn a lot from them. They actually had a campaign, I believe they started last year, and very similar to kind of how we've started our approach with bringing in parents and having conversations, and on the backside of the work study that they did, that our committee is doing right now, they had a really nice, I would say, community press to kind of bring parents up to speed on everything that they had found. They created a slogan for it. I'm trying to remember right now off the top of my head. I think it's disconnect to reconnect. Is that right? Did I pull that out of the air? Okay, so, and they held several community meetings and took kind of a roadshow. They took all the information that, and the research and the studies that our group is kind of doing right now with our locals, and kind of took that on the road, kind of similar to what we're planning to do with our screen time committee after this. They had really good feedback. They had really good outreach through their website and through those meetings. They videoed, recorded those meetings, and have those on their website. So lots of good information from the community. Andy dug even deeper into that probably than I did. Did I leave anything out that you want to add, Andy?
No, sir, you did a great
great,
job.
Great.
Yeah, and I thank you so much for Melissa and Dave for your input on that, because actually, regardless how the vote goes on Monday, that can be a great resource, and I'll explain that a little bit more as I pass out these things. There'll be one for everyone except for Bobby. Anyway, so what I did is I just took this data because I needed some linear information, and so as this is passed out, I won't highlight everything, but there's a few things I'd like to just to read off so that the people out in the community can hear. So I took the raw data and put it in the computer, and I took the question that was posed to the parents, which was just very general, and then I also included how supporting a bell-to-bell policy, and how did that data, the feedback, line up with that data. So the briefing summarizes key insights from stakeholders, the feedback on the proposed wireless communication about policy, and it focused on actionable themes beyond simple support or opposition. And the overall sentiment was most comments were neutral or informational. And among respondents who expressed a clear position, support for the policy exceeded opposition. However, respondents consistently highlighted considerations important for implementation, and that's where, again, that website would be very beneficial. And then I go to number 1, executive summary of feedback, and to the bullet points. More respondents, again, supported the wireless communication policy than opposes it. The support tended to be tied to reducing distraction and improving academic focus. And the opposition, and we know this too, is generally rooted in student-parent communication concerns, especially related to safety, transportation, anxiety, and medical considerations. And so I'd like the community to know that that the state has already, put into effect the law for medical considerations for phones. And then, we talked a lot about the communication aspect at the policy meeting. And I know myself, I'll just speak for myself, I think those are all reasonable requests that, that parents should have. We have communication now for students to reach out to employers or parents for different things. There's a lot of issue with dual enrollment, and I think there's, the administration is capable of implementing any kind of communication necessary with the students. And so I don't really see that as an obstacle for supporting a bell-to-bell, because I have faith in our administration to be able to implement that by an August 1st deadline. And so just as a quantitative position summary, there were a total of 2,656 emails, basically. And so the support was 643, and the oppose was 289. The neutral non-position was 1,724. And so the conclusion was that the support was greater than the opposition among clearly positioned respondents, but most comments are neutral, and they were asking for clarification. So I thought that was really important that the board needs to know, and that's what the tech committee has talked about as well. So they've shared that to the tech committee, and they talked about procedural suggestions rather than arguments. And this is also really interesting by grade band. The elementary schools that supported it, there was 175 parents, and those that opposed it were 103. In the middle school, 97 supported it and 52 opposed it. And high school, it was 207 that supported it and 67 opposed it. And then we also have parents with multi-grade students, and that was 164 that supported it and 67 that opposed it.
Hey, Tanya.
And, yeah.
I just have one question. I'm sorry. Is this on the policy? Was this on the policy we're looking at now?
No. This is from
This
the raw
was on-
data. This is
feedback, right, like what Josh was
Right.
saying.
This
This
is-
is feedback on the policy that we have right now.
Yeah.
Not feedback on the policy we're voting on Monday
Right.
night.
On the
That's right. Thank
on the
you.
one. Okay, that we voted
That
in
we
at the
currently
end of
have,
last.
Right.
Bell to bell, K through 8.
Okay, so this is
Everything
about,
except
this
for
isn't
lunch
about the
in high school.
proposed one now.
Right,
Correct.
but just so we get an
okay.
idea of what the parents
Gotcha.
are thinking.
No, you're, I just, I
that's a
was
good
just
question.
confused.
Yeah.
Thank
And so the interpretation was that the support peaks at the high school level. And then we can go on, and this was interesting. The opposition is most pronounced among elementary parents, largely due to communication access. So they want to be able to communicate with their little ones. Then I go on, and I just, for your information, there was some representative quotes on supports and opposing. And then the primary concern, this is really important too, is communication access with parents. And those issues that they mentioned most were transportation changes, after-school pickup coordination, the medical needs again, anxiety or emotional support needs, emergency in or around school property. And again, I just go to a lot of these things have already been addressed at the state level. And it's not a sufficient reason to oppose the bell-to-bell, because our school board or our administration will be able to to design ways around that. And then this was also important too. If the district wants strong acceptance, it must clearly communicate how and when students can contact parents, what the process is during emergencies, how staff will support urgent needs without phone access. And that has also been discussed at the technology committee. And then I wanted to go on to number 6. Many parents want guidance, not just rules. And I think this is really important for as we move forward into the next section, because I've picked up 2 books that talk about, it's mostly for parents, and it talks about how to incorporate a balanced life of technology in your home, and you need to encourage the schools to implement bell-to-bell to support that. And then you can see what the families, and that would go to the website as well, as educating families and students about, this is what parents were concerned about: healthy technology habits, digital citizenship, online safety, screen time balance, social emotional impacts of device dependency. And so those are concerns of parents. And then this was also very interesting. Middle school environment is viewed as the critical risk zone. And so that's where the respondents described phones as socially harmful, cited bullying, screenshots, rumor spreading, social comparison. Another bullet point was they connected the phone use to anxiety and self-image issues and peer pressure. So that is something that raw data provided, and I thought was very interesting. And then the last thing I just want to emphasize is many supportive respondents note that the policy may improve socialization, but others worry about students feeling exposed or anxious or coping without a coping tool. And I thought that was a little concerning and alarming because if I'm understanding that right, students kind of feel it as a safety net for them. I don't know. So I'm not quite understanding that it's a safety net, like a pacifier or a security blanket, and I don't think that's a healthy thing. So that's something we need to look at, and yeah, and then that's pretty much it on the back. There's one more thing. Many comments are requests for clarification and not necessarily opposition. And, where would the devices be stored? And again, that's something that the administration can work on as they, they roll it out the policy, because we have a good communication department. So does anybody have any other questions maybe about that? But that helped me to take that data and just put it in a linear focus, just going from step to step. So
I just want to point out, so we're all on the same page. So this is about feedback on the existing policy, and that more responders support the wireless communication policy than oppose it. And then also your point about middle school environment is a critical risk zone, and we are currently bell to bell in middle school.
yes, and well, I don't want to say too much, but I do think we need to make sure, I was reading some other things too, that we have the support of the teachers and the principals, because we want to make sure that, I don't want to say too much, that because if they're not supporting bell to bell and we have issues that come up, that's the reason why. So just to make sure that we implement it fully, if that's what the desire is of the board.
Jay?
Thank you. Just a couple of things that really, I guess, we talk about the research and the data. I mean, it's really clear on, and I think the focus certainly is the instructional time, but I think we have the opportunity to greatly, one, to address all the concerns that have been brought up, and a lot of the opposition, if you will, like a lot of the opinions that have come up, are, it's almost straw man against an argument and against a decision that has not been made yet with regards to this policy, because it's clear that, I mean, to me, the three things that the district would have to really have discretion on and have to decide on is the method of storage, and then and the method of storage is going to drive the things like communication and the ability of student, like how accessible are the devices going to be for students to be able to contact their parents? Are they going to, where are they going to do that? Like, well, that's all dependent upon, are they in their backpacks, or are they stored away in a secure pouch or locker or something like that? And then the enforcement piece, I know it's been described as working fairly well right now, but I still, the fact that they're touching their phones at the end of every class and beginning of every class, and they're in the hallways, and it's largely not enforced at the same level as the class period. It makes the current policy just potential for the enforcement to slide over time, and the closer the students are to their phones, as they even spoke, the if you separate the students from access from their phones, they're just the temptation is just less. And so I just encourage us to look at the goal and understand that we still need more. There's some decisions to be made around these things that can make all of the not all of them, but many of the concerns can make those, bring those into solutions. But one thing I wanted to I guess I wanted to ask Fletch about is, because it came up early, and with students not having immediate access to their phones, about emergency use. And so there's a difference between urgent and emergent. So I think most of the concerns that we've heard is kind of urgent use to that, hey, I need to get in touch with my kid needs to get in touch with me, and it's more of an urgent thing sometime before the end of the day, and lunch seems to be as offered in the current policy seems to be okay with the parents that seem to think that that's working fine. But Fletch, can you I talked to you, it's been 6 or 7 years ago now, not about cell phone use necessarily, but it was about access to cell phones with regards to our cell phone signals not being as strong in the school. And I was contemplating whether I would support boosting that signal to from a safety, primarily a safety perspective. And the conversation that you had completely changed my mind on thinking about that in terms of cell phones as where they rank in our kind of emergency protocols, if you will. So can you just speak to kind of the role of cell phones in, especially by students, but I guess even by staff during an emergency situation?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Overall, cell phones, dependent where you're at in the county, depends on what kind of signal strength that you have in the first place. And then certainly being inside the building and depending on where you're at inside our buildings is going to affect the cell phone, meaning it's not consistent throughout the county. So therefore, I don't really rely on it at a high level at all to be one of our primary modes of communication to call for help. We've got several other robust methods that work well and I actually think communicate better in that sense. And then throughout the county, the inconsistency of the cellular service throughout the county does have an impact. Now, that being said, to be able to call 911, when you call 911, whatever system is out there, whether it's your service provider or not, is going to grab that and send it to 911. So you can maybe not be able to make a phone call to somebody, but you can get through to 911, which is a good thing. I know that our 911 center gets those every day, all the day, and it's pretty interesting. In areas where you probably can't get a cell signal, you can get a 911 call out. So it does have the ability to do that, but as far as our notification piece, it's not something that I rely on heavily because it's too inconsistent to really try to apply that across the board. If we were going to harness that as one of the methods, it would be, we could say do it well at Brentwood High, but at Bethesda Elementary we wouldn't, right? Because of just the inconsistency in that. So it's not something that I take too much stock in as far as a communication method to summon for help. The system, or the telecommunication system, potentially could be overloaded in some sort of, mass incident. And that has happened in our community in the past, not in a school, but back during the floods, we had some issues with that. Lots of people calling, needing help. It can impact the system, therefore it then could be, unreliable. That being said, you only need one or so notifications to 911 and you're going to start to get the help that you need. It's going to be dispatched accordingly, but that is, something that could happen. So if you are relying on it and then everybody uses it, then it could fail you in that moment, so to speak. So from that perspective, to answer your question, cell phone's not something that I think is high up as far as reliability to summon for help when we've got many other mechanisms that work so much better and faster and actually communicate to more people all at once rather than just one phone call to a point, a warning point to be able to summon help.
And this might go to Bobby or whomever can help. It seems to me like there's still quite a few tweaks that we want to make with this policy. I know Tanya's mentioned, especially after we heard from Dr. Webb, in the backpack versus not in the backpack, how we store it. I know Claire at the policy meeting mentioned like the high school, how it's got the consequences. There's really no way to enforce the current consequences that are in here at the high school level in terms of first offense, second offense, third offense. So what might be the process if we want to defer this to like push it out? Do we have to make a motion for that at the board meeting, or?
You will. Once it's on the floor, you can make a motion to postpone for a certain date.
Okay, thank you.
Hang on, Dennis. Dennis, hang on. You've spoken already, so anybody else who hasn't spoken want to speak before we go back to him?
I know for me, and I brought this up, policy, and the last time we've talked about it, I do want some kind of solution for access, which we kind of talked about. And I know we had kicked around like email, and then it seemed like maybe that wasn't the ability to do it. I don't know if there's an update on that, or lunchtime or a phone zone. It seemed like the phone zone idea, from what we saw, I think everybody kind of poo-pooed that one a little bit. So lunchtime, I guess, or email in some way. I know, I hear the data. I could even grant it all in a way when it comes to it. But I just think for me, and of all the people I've talked to, and I've talked to a ton of people the last 2 months on this, parents and teachers and everybody in between, and that's like the real big concern is access to parents, or access for those kids that have to work, and scheduling things and all of that, and extracurriculars, and, driving your sister home from school, and changes in schedule, and just all of that. And I know that an argument to be made against that is like, well, we need to help them to be more prepared. And I guess that's the case maybe, but I mean, if we're helping them to prepare, I think also preparing for life after high school with this as a primary mode of communication and work. I mean, I do all my work on this throughout the day in my career, and a lot of people do. So I mean, it's nothing magical happens between graduation and the start of college. So I just really, really would love to see a solution for access. I agree about the enforcement. One of the things I'd love your thoughts on this, Claire, but just I'd be willing to make like the first offense also have confiscation as well. I think that'd be the easier way for them to track what's a first offense, what's a second offense, because they have to take it, and therefore they have to get it back at the end of the day for tracking that type of thing. Because, if you're coming upon a student that has it, well, who knows if it's first or second or third, and they just do like a warning or whatever, I don't know. And then the storage, we kind of talked about this, but, so Tanya, I know you had mentioned like not even in the backpacks necessarily. So are we thinking, because I know there's like several, sorry, Don, I'm going to steal your things here. I know there's like several choices. Where did I see that at? Oh, yeah, right here. Yeah, right over my eyes. This is on, I think, page 1, line 28, and then after that. But devices must remain silent, stored off the body, and then we give options. But are we wanting to like take those options away and just make them all the pouches, or is that like an amendment to this in some way, or like what are your thoughts there?
Well, my thinking is that I know the parents want a consistency across the board, like, with class to class, school to school. That was in the briefing that I didn't, happen to mention. So yeah, I thought backpacks would, be suitable, but I think it'd have to be In Jonathan Haidt's book, it has to be level 4 or level 5. So it's either putting it in a locker or in a storage unit like a yonder pouch and things like that. Yeah. And then currently, just right now, I think the policy that we have, and I don't even think I would have approved it if I had thought it through a little bit clearer, but the way it is now, the kids have the phones in their hands all day long, and I think it's very difficult to enforce. And I know I would not be, as a child, as young person, I'd be looking at my phone going to class, I mean, just to be honest. And so I don't think it's fair that I would ask them, to get in trouble for it if I wouldn't do it myself. So that's just my thoughts.
So is that so I'm just trying to understand, so are you for pouches? I thought like pouches because the students liked it because it took the distraction away from their backpack.
Yeah, that's the cell phone pocket. So the pouches would be like a yonder pouch.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I meant
exactly.
pockets.
Pouches. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Like the yonder pouches or something. And that was like my last thing. And now I just, when I come to think about, their lack of impulse control, it's just, I mean, it is for adults too. I mean, you just want to check your phone all the time and see if you got messages.
So you'd prefer the pockets versus like backpacks?
Yeah. For me, I think the backpacks are out just based on
Gotcha.
What I'm seeing and what my observations are. And I'd rather see in there, originally I thought the lockers, and they say, well, they don't. Well, that's kind of good. Actually, if they don't use their lockers, they can keep them in there.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then at the end of the day, you can pick them out or whatever. But yeah, just something that's more secure that,
Where they have to
so it's easier.
drop it off type of thing.
Yeah, well,
there.
and that's the other thing too. I've said this at the work session or at one of the tech meetings, is the simpler that we can make the policy, the easier it will be to implement. When we start to add, like it is now, it's very difficult. And it's difficult for the teachers, it's difficult for the principals. And so it's a very average, on a scale of 0 is no policy to a 5, it's about a 3.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I would agree in that sense. Like I would like to, I guess instead of having like the options, I would prefer us just to say it's either in your backpack locker thing or it's in the pocket or something like that. That would be my thing there. With going through this, that was why I wanted to ask. So it seemed like everybody, that was approval or supportive of this, that's with, this current policy was a bell-to-bell ban in elementary and middle school, correct?
Yes.
But in lunch for high school.
That's correct.
So when we're talking about that's what everybody, was supportive of, I mean, that's what all of this is about. Which I think goes to, like, I think most people are on board. The community, it seems, they understand, like, the pitfalls of the cell phones and problems they cause with class and even social and all that type of stuff. But an access point, particularly for those in high school, I think is paramount for the majority of people. And I just, for me, anything I would vote for would have to have a solution for access in it. So I don't know if we want to, was there an update on email as a solution?
Go ahead, Brian.
Was that Brian?
Yes, sir. So we have talked to several local districts, our IT team and myself, and Andy Davis and Lee, they went to the consortium group that has the 6 or 7 school districts that we work with. With them, they asked them, all of them, I believe, were like us, had outside email closed for their high school. Some of them had a way for the entire day phone policy, and some kind of had what we're doing now with the lunch, but they all had closed email. They still didn't do it. We have checked with some local districts, and I'm not going to give their names, but there are a couple around our area that do have open email, but it's not just for parents. They just open it up for high school students that they can get outside email.
So what you're saying, so is there a way where it can be, I know it sounds like probably a lot of work, but is there a way that there can be an access with email where it's just like the parents that are opened up to the students' email?
We have not found that yet, and we have checked, and we've checked with vendors.
Or their work, I guess, too?
Yeah, we have not found that solution. And if that was a solution, which we haven't found, that still doesn't fix it for work or extracurricular or anything like that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so.
And
okay.
some of the feedback, and this is just comments from some of the school districts about why they kept it closed, even for Away for the Day, is if you allowed outside email or parents to email, then when are they going to be doing it? They're going to be doing it during class while they're on the Chromebook.
Yeah.
That they would be, so that would be a distraction there. That's just some of what we've heard.
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't, I would love to see us work within changing just some of these things in here, because I think a lot of the clarifying language in this policy that, Claire, that you put in there, I think we need. It's what people asked for. And I think we need it. Just for me, I really have to have a solution for access. It's in some way. That's just where I'm at right now.
So, could I respond, Tony?
Yeah. Oh,
sure.
Yeah, I'm done.
So I think, we pushed the implementation date to August, and for me, it comes down to we can extend and extend and extend and try to find solutions, or you can say, do I agree with the concept of Away for the Day based on what I know, based on all the data I've seen, knowing that more and more states in our country are going that way. And we are giving the district 8 months to figure out some of these pieces. If it's a yonder pouch, then there's a magnet in the office, that's your cell phone zone. You can go, they're still built into the policy that teachers have the ability to say to a student, yes, you can go and make the call you need to make, go unlock your phone, make the call, lock it back up, and come back. And so giving some time, we're giving that time, then, say in the spring, we revisit this and we get an update. What are some of those pieces look like? And we can then tweak the policy if we need to at that time. Or someone can bring it forward and say, bring it up for a vote again. That's kind of how I see it. When I think about what we were doing this time last year, we were reading books, getting ready to decide at a specially called meeting whether 5 books were going to stay in our libraries. And we had to make that determination because of state law, but the concern was about content in those books. And we also got the data from the libraries that showed us that the kids weren't really checking out those books. And yet, we're perfectly okay with letting kids have devices where, I have a stat in front of me, I think it is a third of high school students, pornography exposure, a third of all teens report that they have been exposed to pornography during the school day. And yet we're worried about the books and we're willing to make exceptions for the phones. So, I can't look at the data in good conscience and say that Away for the Day isn't the way to go. When we hear the reports coming out of school districts that have done this, it's nothing but positive. There's reduction in bullying, a steep drop in bullying. 46% of girls and 43% of boys experience a reduction of bullying after smartphone bans were enacted. And that's from, this is all data that's freely available on the Phone Free School Movement website. So we know, we acknowledge that there's an increase in anxiety and depression and suicide rates among our adolescents, and we've introduced social emotional learning into the curriculum. We're introducing more school psychologists, but we ignore the one thing, it's like the elephant in the room, that we could do that could make a serious difference. And, you know, Adam Wright sent us that study that was published out of Florida, based on the Florida schools systems, and they saw improvements in test scores after bans. They saw, I have the abstract up, let me see. So, they saw it significantly reduced student unexcused absences, and there was a significant increase in test score gains. So I don't know how we can ignore that data. And so that's, I think, the question that you all need to decide as we take this to a vote is very simple. You know, do you agree with the data and want to go with the ban? And then we'll give the district time to figure out exactly how implementation is going to work and how we're going to allow for that legitimate communication that kids need to make during the school day. And if we can figure out a workable solution, just like many other school districts have, from New York City public schools to huge school districts in California and Texas and Florida, I think we're quite capable of doing it. But if we're not for some reason, or people are still uncomfortable, then we can bring it back up for a vote.
So one thing I agree with here is, you know, this is about agreeing with the concept for a way for the day, and it is. That's kind of what this all boils down to, because there's been a lot of scarecrow arguments comparing nothing to everything, and that's not what we're doing. We've already restricted it from all the classrooms. We're already doing a bell-to-bell for elementary. We're already doing it for middle school. What we're talking about here is something very specific, high school only, and lunchtime only. And so when we're doing comparisons here, and we're talking about the data, is this data comparing 97% to 100%, or is it comparing 0% to 100%? And I haven't seen that other portion of it. So let's be specific and honest kind of about the comparison of what we're doing here. I haven't quantified the parental feedback from those who actually have a child enrolled in a Williamson County Schools high school. But I've seen and read the emails, and so have all of you, and it's somewhere around 100%. The actual parents who have a high school student enrolled in a Williamson County high school that have emailed us, we've all seen this, do not want this. We got the email from Dr. Webb. The principals do not want this. The assistant principals do not want this. The teachers do not want this. And all of those groups, I think, also care about their children. Donna said something last time we talked about going and watching the kids during lunch, and you inspired me. I did the same thing. I went to Franklin High School during lunch, and I watched them. And what I saw was kids interacting. Kids being kids, hanging out, chatting, eating lunch, often small groups, roaming. There'd be a group, and sometimes one would pull up a phone and do that, and they'd put it away, and they'd start talking. And I went over to one of the assistant principals to one of the groups, and I asked them, and I said, hey, what were you just doing on your phone? You know, and of course, their immediate reaction was, I wasn't doing, you know. I said, no, you're not in trouble. I'm curious. Tell me what you're doing. What were you doing? What were you doing? So I was tracking package on Amazon. Boom. Oh, there it is. Put away. Another one. I was checking my work schedule. It changes sometimes. I got to see if I'm working today or not. Another one, I was communicating with mom about practice, letting her know when I need to be picked up. Another one was, I was showing one of my friends here just a photo from vacation. We were chatting back and forth. It was interaction. You know, I think you can make a strong case for freshmen probably, but that that really sounds complicated. How are you going to have separate rules for freshmen and everything else? And it is. The other end, you know, sophomores, juniors, seniors. When I was a senior in high school, I joined the Army. I committed for multiple years to go into the military, and 6 months later, there was a war that was started, and they were sending kids my age to the Middle East to go shoot and kill people. So you can vote. You can be tried as an adult. And short time afterwards, you're going to go off to your career. With you, I'm working through my phone a bit. And that. All this to say, when we're talking about this, let's keep in mind specifically what we're talking about here. It's not whether or not these kids should be Facebook streaming during math class. We'll say, no, they shouldn't. We've already banned that. We've already said you can't do that and everything else. It's about saying, do you have enough flexibility and everything else that if you need to pull it out and check a text or something during the day and put it away, that's fine. And from what I've seen overwhelmingly, that's kind of what the kids are doing with it. And I just don't get, I don't see it, the boogeyman stories that because they did that, because a young lady checked on where her Amazon package currently was, 5 seconds to put it away, that she then couldn't concentrate in her physics class 2 hours later. And our scores don't reflect it either. I also question the timing. We're talking about it, something going into place in August. It's November. Why do we have the committee, they're talking through, they're going things, other things can change. We've got time to adjust this. We've got time to adjust it with everything else. I don't know who said it. Maybe he said it. He said the rules aren't enforceable. And here we are on a Thursday night, potentially putting something in place Monday for 9 months out, where we ourselves are going, well, wait a minute, how do you foresee this happening? Well, what about this rule? Well, what will we do? It feels very half-baked, and it feels half-baked for a process that, again, we all know this is true. The parents of the children that are impacted by this do not want. They don't want it, and we all know that's true because we have all seen the emails and the communications from the people who actually have a child in these high schools telling us we don't want it.
Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet?
I'll jump in. So I went this week also to Brentwood High and at lunchtime, and I would just kind of look around and gauge about 10 kids out of the 10, how many are on the phone? Maybe one, sometimes not even that. And same thing at Franklin High. Fast math, it was around 10%, maybe less. And they weren't on it it wasn't what my family jokes and calls it brain rot. They were just checking a couple things, and then we went into the lunchroom at the cafeteria, and there were some kids sitting around their Chromebooks, working on projects and things like that. So I keep going back to the saying, let's keep the main thing the main thing. We're about educating kids. That's our number one thing, and having the best education in the state. And where I struggle is, and some things I've learned as I've talked to more and more people, I don't see us fully implementing the policy we have. I talked to a sub this week too, and he was complaining that the kids are on their phone in the class time, during instructional time. They didn't have them in the pockets. Now, I was a teacher for years, and I know, and I was also a student, as we all were, and when you have subs, you kind of squeak by with things. So, but I think I would like to see in our policy, and I'd like to request for our Monday's meeting if we can have our current policy also in the agenda, so we can kind of see what they look like. But I'd like to see some consequences that if the kids have their phone in instructional time, take it immediately. You know, let's keep the main thing, and let's really focus on getting fully implemented. So that's all I had to say.
Anyone else who hasn't spoken? So I'm going to share a couple thoughts, just as a board member, not as a chair, but I was not at the policy meeting, so I didn't get a chance to participate in that discussion. But where this comes down for me, and I've processed a lot of this, just like everybody else has, no one disputes the impact that phones and screen time have on kids. No one disputes that. And for me, where I've had to land on this is we have these kids from bell to bell. The kids are in school bell to bell for 7 hours a day. What we're talking about right now is 30 to 40 minutes of a 7-hour day. But we have them for less than 1/3 of an entire day, an actual 24-hour day. And I think we probably all realize, because my kids do it, that when they get home from school, the minute that bell rings, they get on the bus, they got the phone. And they have it, depending on the family, depending on the situation, they have it maybe nonstop until they go to bed. So to me, the impact of the harm that's being done to these kids from using cell phones is significantly happening more outside of school than it is in school. And that's just a fact. So then it comes down to a question of convenience. Does it matter to have convenience for these kids and for their parents to have access to the phone for 30 minutes or 40 minutes a day? Is a convenience an important thing? And does the convenience of having the phone for 30 or 40 minutes negate the benefits of not having them the other 6.5 hours? I don't think it negates that. I think we get the benefit in our current policy, we get the benefit of not having them in instructional time, which is what all of our goal is. We also get the benefit of saying there's a convenience factor that if you need them, you get them, but folks have anecdotally said that even when they have access to them, they're not necessarily using them. But to me, that convenience factor is important, and I think we've heard from quite a few people in the community about that. So, the other thing is, and Eric kind of alluded to this, the fact is that most of these seniors are adults. They're not even kids. I mean, they're adults. And maybe even some of the juniors are adults. Not many, but some. So we're talking about legal adults who, are making decisions as legal adults outside of that building. So it's not to dispute the science, it's not to dispute the impact of these electronic devices on kids and their brains, it's not to dispute any of that. It's to say the time we're talking about, can it really be that much of a distraction compared against the desire for convenience, that's just where I've had to land on it as I've thought through all the different arguments. And I don't necessarily think that I'm in a position to say we're going to put something in place now that bans lunch for next school year when we're this far out. And there's a lot of conversation that still has to happen, as evidenced by this tonight, about some of the other aspects of enforcement and storage, and those are legitimate questions we've got to deal with. And we may have to deal with them inside the policy, we may have to deal with them outside the policy. But we still have to deal with them. And so I'm not opposed to dealing with those in this policy now, if that's the desire, the will of the board. But as to the particular part about the fundamental change from the current policy to this proposed amendment is obviously it's the high school lunch period. So that's the part that I just spoke to and really can't get comfortable with. Dan, you haven't spoken yet. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I can't say I've ever been in a work session where I have agreed with, I think, every comment that has been said. I personally have been going back and forth on this whole situation. The data speaks for itself. It's kind of scary. but the time frame, 20, 25 minutes, maybe 40 minutes for lunch, I'm kind of in agreement with that too. But the main question I want to ask, since we're going to be investigating this, is how did everyone in this room survive without a cell phone? I mean, really. I know things have changed, but we've been going to college for 200 years. Everything's been done. We work after school. The schedule's up. You go in on the schedule. You know, parents, I think that's a lot of the problem is parents. They just can't think that their kids are away from them that long. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is, but sometimes I think take them out, because a lot of those emails that everyone speaks of, parents are saying, well, my child needs to call me a couple times a day just to make decisions. We talked about adults, right? When do we let our children make decisions, whether they're good or bad? The best place is in that high school. So how do they do that when mom is waiting for a phone call? Or we're texting back and forth, oh, geez, what do I should do now? You know, I failed this class. You know, my teacher's not fair. You know, I'll give her a call or whatever. You know, so in that aspect, I think, you know, just leave them in the locker or a pouch or whatever you want to do. But on the other hand, sometimes the freedom just to get on, put your earbuds in and listen to music while you're in study hall. You know, there's many different reasons for having the phone. But it's 40 minutes at Summit, Franklin, and Brentwood, I believe. And the whole class goes, you know, the whole high school class goes to lunch at the same time. The rest of the schools is 25, maybe 30 minutes. By the time you get your food and run around here and there and do what you're going to do and eat, how much time do you have? So that's what I'm saying. That's why I agree with what everyone here has said tonight, but I don't know. We'll see what happens.
All right, if anyone hasn't spoken, this is the chance, and if anybody who has spoken wants to speak again, after that, we'll open it up. All right, anyone who hasn't spoken, going once, going twice. All right, you've spoken again, you've spoken, so you can go again if you want.
All the problems that have been raised have already been resolved by thousands of schools. We just have to go see it. The point I had for Jason and Maria, for our students who have the exemption because of their IEP or some medical condition, where do they carry their cell phones, whether it be now or whether we change the policy? I assume they have to have it on them, given the severity of their condition.
And it varies depending on that very thing, but Maria, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so if it was a medical condition, let's say a child with diabetes, they may have to have their phone in close proximity to check their blood sugar. So yes, they would need to keep the phone on them. If it were for some sort of communication or app or something like that, then yes, there should be an exemption for them to have their phone on them as well. But it would be a specific accommodation either in their 504 health plan or IEP plan. Thank you.
So I shared this at the policy meeting, and I'm going to share it again. You know, this whole conversation has taken me back to the mask mandate. And there was a lot of data to support masking students in school. And as a parent, I chose to actually pull my children from school because I didn't want the local school board deciding when my kid might be in school, when my kid might not be in school, when they might have to wear a mask, when they might not. If we leave it, the policy the way it is, parents have a choice on whether or not their child has a cell phone. And having parented 3 children, we all know they're all different. I have one son who he either didn't have his cell phone or it was so locked down he couldn't do anything with it. But my current son, who attends Nolensville High, I want him to have the phone. Like, he's very responsible. We use it to communicate because he drives and has responsibilities and things like that. So I just had to share that again because I don't know if the policy committee was recorded or whatever, so.
So just a little anecdote related to that. We had a trouble with converting the file, and so we lost the file. Is that an accurate description?
All right, anyone else for round 2? All right, I think we have gotten through that. So again, just as a reminder, that will be up. The amended policy was passed on first reading. The amended policy will be up for second reading on Monday night. All right, approval of board norms. Mr. Golden?
Thank you,
wanna
Mr.
walk us through
Chair.
that?
Our annual agenda calls for you all to review and affirm the school board norms. It's in your packet. Open to any discussion you may have related to those norms you set for yourself. Just as a reminder, this is different from the Code of Ethics, which is a financial structure. This is a commitment you all are making to each other.
Any questions on the board norms? And that, we're not voting on that as a policy per se, or are we?
It's officially a policy. It's just that the annual agenda calls for an annual affirmation, annual review and affirmation. So it is officially a policy.
But it'd be a first and final reading.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's correct. It would be first and final.
Yeah, okay. Any questions? Okay, and the final item for tonight is the approval of the superintendent's evaluation instrument.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The proposed superintendent's evaluation form is exactly the same form as last year with the superintendent district goals plugged in. My thinking on that is, while if I was starting from scratch, I might want to tweak it, I like having some longitudinal history. So I think it's just the wise thing to do to leave it as is so that we have that longitudinal history.
Say that again. Can you scroll through the instrument? Thank you.
So if I may, since you're asking for a scroll, the state law requires the demonstrable characteristics to be part of the superintendent's evaluation. That's the back end of the part that the school board in this particular document counts as 20%. This particular structure counts the observational goals, which are the annual goals that we discuss as the 80%.
I have a quick question to follow up, because at the last work session, I talked about trying to do SMART goals, because these seem more like action items. Were you able to investigate your contract and any other policies that we might need to change if we want to move more to a SMART goal structure?
My understanding of that discussion was it might be something we work on next year based on the board setting these 4 goals for me this year. Short answer is yes, I think so. From a timing perspective, it might take us adjusting a piece of my contract. My advice on that would be we probably need to talk about that in the spring, maybe in between the 3rd and 4th quarter to prepare for the next year.
So this is very 11th hour, and I apologize for it, but as I was kind of going through some things today, and it's kind of this, you have these moments of, epiphany, if you will, a moment of clarity. And here's what I ask everyone to kind of do real quick is think of one sentence real quick. What is the whole purpose of this? The district, the school system, boil it down, simple sentence. What are we here for?
Prepare
And
students.
educate kids, some version of that, I think, is probably what everyone's got in their mind. I'm seeing nods pretty much. And so when I do this and I look at the goals, all of these things are in support of that. They are, all of them are. But it's a really small percentage of it that's directly that's tied into it. And I think it's a lot of what you're saying on it as well. It's too far, and I'm not going to try and say, hey, let's all redo this and everything, because Eric Welch just changed his mind and at 11:59 before the project's due. But I do think, and I would just kind of wanted to say it here, as we're thinking about long-term, I do think we need to get more focus maybe on some of the student measurables with it. And I think about some of the things we had in the past, and I'll give you an example. It was stretch goals like, what's our ACT scores, and what is our enrollment in AP classes, and things like that, measurables for the students. And I think part of that maybe is something that we need to think about and get back to. And it's not a discussion for now, because again, I do apologize. This is the 11th hour, and we should have done this a lot sooner. But it was just, as I was looking at it again, I kind of had that moment of, what's the whole point of this? Boil it down to the forest for the trees, and then let's define the goals based upon what we think that is from there. So at least wanted to put out there and say it, though.
And one other thing I would like to bring up is, I do believe that you have to submit an LEA plan each year
Yes, we
to
do.
the state.
That's correct.
Can we get a copy of that?
Sure.
Because that's where we could
Yep.
probably start seeing some alignment too. Like, what are the LEA goals? And, what data are you using to measure your progress? And that also speaks to that book I talked about, coherence. Like, let's try to start aligning these so that we're focusing our impact on student success and not trying to go in 400 million directions. So
I think those are good suggestions. I'm encouraged by that discussion.
Am I understanding correctly, though, that would be helpful to have, you said, in the spring?
Yes,
that
ma'am.
discussion? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's all remember that. Okay.
Good to know. Yeah, we'll
Yes.
all remind each other.
Thank you.
Duly noted. All right, any other questions on the evaluation instrument? And just
Just one time.
first and final. Yeah, just as a reminder, these are, as he said, the goals that we set for him have been plugged into this document. So when we approve it, if we approve it, then we'll be evaluating him using this against those goals in May. Okay? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.